Chapter 999. Brother! Sister! Help me! The young man and the others' faces were distorted by the scream that was infinitely close to supersonic, and it also caused the air to vibrate. Visible folds appeared in the nearby space, and circles of ripples spread out. It was unknown whether it was the sound waves or the traces of space distortion, but this scream caused the area within a radius of 100 meters to become silent. Even the volcano below was silenced. Everyone was stunned on the spot, and their faces were blank. They didn't know how this little girl could shout out such a perverted sound wave. Little Purple Soul took a deep breath. She grabbed the young man's robe and wiped the saliva off the corner of her mouth. She smiled and said, "Oh, it's done." Everyone was speechless. Whether it was the youths or the pursuers, they were all dumbfounded. They didn't know what was going on. However, they could clearly sense that something was going on right after that. Boom, space was changing, distorting, and the air was trembling. The berserk energy that permeated the volcanoes seemed to have sensed something in advance and retracted all of its energy, shivering. The dark clouds in the sky also trembled and rapidly dissipated. Not long after, one could see the clear sky and the boundless star field. An extremely terrifying energy was rapidly approaching, bringing with it an aura that seemed capable of destroying the world and exploding stars. This was an aura that was enough to make the heavens and earth tremble. In midair, not far from the young man and the others, the space suddenly distorted and a violent energy that could not be any stronger came out from it. It was as if an ancient demon god was slowly walking out from it. That terrifying aura made everyone not dare to move. Only Little Purple Soul felt the most familiar aura and cheered in joy. After a while, a crack suddenly appeared in the distorted space and slowly formed a space door. A huge fire phoenix suddenly flew out of it and appeared in front of everyone. Yun Nuoshing and his companions were on the back of the fire phoenix. Yun Nuoshing's face was extremely gloomy. It could be said that the murderous aura that he released was almost condensed into a substance. He quickly looked around, but in the end, he did not find any super threats, such as gods or anything like that. What appeared in his line of sight were only a dozen or so demigods, and that terrifying aura was instantly withdrawn. When he turned around and saw Little Purple Soul jumping on the four-winged green bird, Yun Nuoshing heaved a sigh of relief. He appeared in front of the little girl in a flash and picked her up. He scolded her softly, "Where did you go? You scared us to death. Next time you go out, say something." Little Purple Soul stuck out her little tongue and shrunk her head. She knew that she had caused trouble, so she didn't resist. She lowered her head and accepted the scolding. She thought that Yun Nuoshing would say something else, but she didn't hear anything. She couldn't help but raise her little head. She saw Yun Nuoshing glaring at her and stammering, but he couldn't say anything. Little Purple Soul didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She forgot that her brother didn't know how to scold people. After waiting for a while and making sure that her brother had nothing else to say, Little Purple Soul quickly pulled Yun Nuoshing's face. She pointed her little finger at the people surrounding them and said, "Brother, there are bad guys over there. Beat them up." The group of people turned pale with fright. They had sensed that the person who came out of the dimension portal was extremely dangerous, and it seemed like he had a lot to do with the little girl. Their hearts skipped a beat when she pointed at them, but they were still confused. They had been chasing the little girl for 2 days, but they hadn't seen her at all. If she had such a strong helper, they wouldn't have had to chase after her. Instead, it would have been their turn to run. "Don't talk nonsense." The leader's face turned pale. He quickly retorted, "I'm looking for them, not you." "You just threw a beam of energy at us," Little Purple Soul muttered. "Oh." When Yun Nuoshing heard this, he replied with a long voice. With just a few words and a few reactions, he understood what had happened. Little Purple Soul had run out and somehow got mixed up with the 4 people beside her. Then, the group of people who were chasing after her had mistakenly thought that she was in their attack range. After all, she was just a small one. If they were not careful during the chase, they would not have noticed such a small little girl. Cold sweat broke out on the leader's face when he saw the strange expression on Yun Nuoxing's face. He felt uneasy being stared at by the pair of beautiful eyes, and his heart was trembling. It was an inexplicable intuition that the celestial artifact in his hand didn't give him any sense of security. The whole place was filled with a suffocating aura of death. One careless mistake and he would be doomed eternally. His expression fluctuated indeterminately. The aura in the surroundings seemed to be directed at him alone, because no one else could sense this devouring aura. Instead, they looked at him with an indescribable expression. They did not know what had happened, but he was extremely clear that there was definitely a ferocious demon hidden under that adorable and beautiful face, or even a crazy demon. That aura pressured him to the point that his soul was about to shatter. A moment later, the devouring aura became even stronger. He shuddered and hurriedly put away the celestial artifact. He bowed and said, This is a misunderstanding." Yun Nuoxing waved her hand impatiently and said coldly, "You have 5 seconds to disappear into the horizon. Also, I left an energy mark on them. If I find you guys here when the mark is broken, don't blame me for wiping out the entire place." Hearing that, the leader was sweating profusely. He nodded so hard that he almost left afterimages. He didn't dare to say anything else. Instead, he quickly waved his hand and fled into the distance. Sometimes, the aura and the pressure on the soul were even scarier than a direct attack. At least, he was scared out of his wits. Although it was only 5 seconds, Yun Nuoxing didn't really count those 5 seconds. To a group of demigods, even if they were wielding a low-tier celestial artifact, it was only a matter of time for her to flick her fingers. Moreover, Little Purple Soul was obviously unharmed. She probably joined in the fun of others. Therefore, there was no need for her to deal with these ants. After those people left, Yun Nuoxing put Little Purple Soul on her shoulder. She looked at the 4 people who were still in a daze. She smiled and said, "Although I don't know what exactly happened, but my little sister has troubled you guys. I'm sorry." Hearing that, the young man trembled violently. He quickly waved his hand and said, No, the little girl is quite cute. Ugh, we should be the ones thanking her for chasing them away." The delicate princess heaved a sigh of relief. She lay down on the ground and mumbled, "They're finally gone. I'm so tired. I'm so tired." After saying that, she felt that something was wrong. Qing Qing seemed to be trembling. She felt a sense of fear coming from Qing Qing. She couldn't help but turn to Yun Nuoxing and said, "Big sister." "Oh, it should be big brother. Little Purple Soul called you that." Everyone scratched their heads. Yun Nuoxing had the face of a girl. She was so beautiful that she could mesmerize anyone. However, she was actually a guy. When the young man first saw Yun Nuoxing and heard Little Purple Soul call him Big Brother, he felt that his worldview was about to collapse. This was completely illogical. How could there be a man in this world who looked more like a girl than a girl? If you have something to say, just say it. Yun Nuoxing raised her chin and said, "Your bird is too scary. Tell it to restrain itself. My Qing Qing is scared." The delicate princess pointed at the phoenix not far away, then at Qing Qing by her feet. She blinked at Mei Mao and said in a wrong tone, "That." Yun Nuoxing was stunned for a moment. She smiled bitterly and waved her hand. "That's not a mount. It's a condensation of my power." "Ugh, let's not talk about that. Why did this girl come here?" Yun Nuoxing shook her head and asked. "She just ate something." The young man scratched his head and laughed awkwardly. He told them everything that happened after Little Purple Soul appeared and took out the flower. Yun Nuoxing took the flower and looked at it. The petals were 1 foot long and there was a fruit hanging from the top of the 3 stamens. It looked like a fruit, but it didn't look like a fruit. "This is just a very ordinary. I guess it's not that ordinary. It doesn't have any medicinal properties, and it's not a precious herb. The only thing worth mentioning is that these two fruits are very delicious. They can be said to be the most delicious thing in the world, but they don't have much value. Is it just delicious? Little Moon came to her side and poked the stamen with her finger. Yun Nuashing pondered and looked at Little Purple Soul, who was sitting on her shoulder. She hesitated for a moment and said, "In the past, when I was dealing with children and pets who were picky about their food, I would mix in some of these things for them to eat." Everyone was stunned. Little Purple Soul stomped her little legs and said angrily, "I'm not picky about my food." Yun Nuashing smiled helplessly and patted the girl's head. "I didn't say that you're picky about your food. It's just that this flower is used in this way. It's understandable that you were attracted to it. After all, your nose is more sensitive than—" The last sentence was said very softly, and no one heard it. He felt that after saying this sentence, his hair would be braided into knots by this naughty little girl, the kind that couldn't be untied even after a long time. However, he didn't feel happy if he didn't say it out loud. He didn't know how this little girl's nose grew, but she actually flew over from such a far distance, thousands of miles away. She even accurately smelled the scent coming from this young man's body. This sense of smell was a little too miraculous. "That's all. If there's nothing else, we'll take our leave." Yun Nuashing nodded to the few of them. Just as he was about to leave, the tall and slender woman hurriedly said, "Hey, wait, do you have urgent matters to attend to now?" Yun Nuashing shook her head. "We don't have anything to do." The lady was stunned for a moment and smiled bitterly. She ran her fingers through her hair and said, "You saved us. I feel bad if I let you leave like this." Yun Nuashing was just about to wave his hand and say that there was no need to mind it. He was just bringing his little girl home. However, the royal sister only paused for a moment before continuing, "There is a special area in this volcanic group. There is a very strange energy and strange star luck there. However, it is quite dangerous there. Currently, many people have tried but have not been able to successfully enter. However, if it is you, perhaps you can break through." "There's such a place?" Yun Nuashing raised her eyes. The long-haired woman nodded with a smile. After identifying the direction, she extended her hand towards a direction. "It's roughly in that direction. Follow this direction and you'll see a very special volcano. It's very easy to recognize. The destination is within the volcano." Yun Nuashing looked in that direction and activated the Eye of the Ocean. The evil spirit Eye also moved and looked in that direction. Not long after, they saw a very special volcano. It was bigger than the surrounding volcanoes by more than 1 or 2 times. If it was a volcano, then the volcanoes beside it were just some small hills that were spitting fire. "What about you guys?" Yun Nuashing asked again. "We won't go. We don't have the fortune to enjoy it." The young man waved his hand and said, "In fact, when we first entered the Holy Spirit Miracle, we went there, but we didn't find anything. Later, the volcanoes erupted, and everyone had to retreat from here. I didn't expect that we would be chased back here. If you want to go, be careful." Yun Nuashing was surprised. She thought that they would go with her. In the end, they just told her about the place and left it at that. The young man smiled as he took out all the red flowers from his interspatial storage device and handed them to Yun Nuashing. He then reached out to poke Little Purple Soul's face and said, "Little Purple Soul, you have to eat properly." "I'm not picky." Little Purple Soul went crazy. She grabbed Yun Nuashing's long hair and pulled, causing the latter to scream in pain. Little Moon and the others smiled bitterly. She was indeed not picky because the things she ate were divine items that were hard to come by. She even ate fairy items as snacks. After a while, Yun Nuashing and the others said goodbye to them and rushed in the direction that the young man and the others had mentioned. The young man and the others watched as Yun Nuashing and the others disappeared from their sight. Their eyes flashed and they couldn't help but chuckle. "What a strange family!" Princess Jiao Qiao waved her hand and ordered the giant cyan bird to turn around and fly out of the volcanoes. They had entered this place to escape, but there was no need for that now. At this time, some of the volcanoes had already been extinguished. The power of the stars that had just been released had covered most of the land, causing the energy in this place to be chaotic. The volcanoes below had quieted down a lot, but it was not as calm as it seemed. Violent energy was still lurking under the ground. Moreover, there were many powerful magic beasts that were active in the volcanoes. However, they felt the absolute suppression of the phoenix and shrank their heads. Not a single magic beast ran out, afraid that they would be smothered by the owner of that pressure. The many magical beasts below also attracted the attention of Yun Nuoxing and the others. However, they didn't pay too much attention to them. The fact that these magical beasts were suppressed by the phoenix's power meant that they were still conscious. They weren't like the beasts they encountered in the Sea of Beasts, so they didn't have to worry about being attacked. This is that place? After the phoenix stopped, Yu was the first to poke her head out. She saw that there was an incomparably huge volcano below. Inside the volcano there was boiling magma. However, it was purple-gold magma. It looked very beautiful and dangerous. Although this energy had the aura of a demigod, the strength of the energy it emitted wasn't just at the demigod level. There's actually a transcendent energy here, and it's naturally formed. Interesting. Yun Nuoxing took a glance and sighed softly. What is a transcendent energy? Little Moon asked. It's just a name for a special kind of energy. Yun Nuoxing looked at the purple-gold magma below and said, for example, as demigods, the energy we release is only at the demigod level. However, we can use mystic arts, divine arts, and many other methods to unleash power that surpasses the demigod level. In other words, the strength of the energy we release is the realm, which is the surface strength. However, the strength of the energy we can release is what we usually call the true strength. On the other hand, the energy born in nature is calm. It won't have this kind of change that surpasses one's own strength. The energy born in nature belongs to the demigod level, and that's the energy of the demigod level. When the energy concentration is high enough, it will mutate and produce special energy. Even if it's comparable to the energy of the human demigod level, it's only that level of energy. Because no one controls it, it can't be like life forms like us, using the energy we possess to release power that surpasses one's own realm. However, there is a type of energy, what I call transcendent energy. It's the energy born in nature and can release power that surpasses one's own energy aura. It's quite dangerous. After all, anyone who senses it for the first time will only think that it's a demigod-level energy. However, once they jump down without any preparation, they'll realize that the energy that surrounds them is comparable to the energy of the demigod level. By then, it'll be too late to regret. After Yun Nuoxing finished speaking, Little Moon shook her head and quickly understood. To put it simply, this transcendent energy was a wolf in sheep's clothing. It should be at the demigod level, but it released the power of the demigod level. Yes, that's what it is. After hearing her summary, Yun Nuoxing's face twitched as she nodded. This should be something that only life forms with spiritual intelligence can do, but it's reflected in the energy born in nature. Therefore, it's given the name transcendent energy. These are not common, but if they exist, they will quickly become famous, because this transcendent energy has extremely special effects. For example, Yu and Mei Mao's eyes sparkled as they looked at her expectantly. Yun Nuoxing smiled as she gently flicked her finger in front of her forehead. She said, "Do you remember what we saw in the comments section of the 9 Milky Way in Spirit State City? Is there a strongest level in a certain level?" The answer is, there is, but it's not that easy to reach. The so-called strongest level in a certain level means that when you cultivate to this level, you shouldn't rush to pursue a higher level. Instead, you should cultivate the part of your current level to the most perfect and complete state. For example, in the demigod level, we mainly cultivate divinity and wash away the mundane part of our body. We continue to condense our spirit and soul power so that they can be sublimated and reach the limit of this level. Then, when we reach the 9th level of the demigod level, we will reach the limit. Under this state, we will be very powerful when we advance to the beginner god level. However, many of the so-called young experts nowadays, those divine sons and divine venerables, I can see that their souls and spiritual powers are not very strong. They neglect these things when they reach the demigod level and blindly pursue higher realms, neglecting the cultivation of their spiritual powers and soul powers. Even if they succeed in advancing to the initial god level, there will still be oversights during the divine tribulation to reconstruct their bodies and become more powerful. This is because their spiritual powers and souls will not be able to keep up with the pace of their realms before stepping onto a higher level. This will pull their powers to two extremes. Even if they cultivate back to the initial god level in the future, there will still be a huge gap between them. Even if they are at the 8th god level, there will still be differences in strength. So on and so forth. Yun Nuashing smiled and didn't say anything. Little Moon quickly reacted. That kind of god is also weak. Yun Nuashing's face stiffened, and she nodded stiffly. That's right. That's right. Ahem, let's get back to the main topic. Transcendent energy can make up for the flaws of the corresponding level. It's just that it's relatively more dangerous. Yun Nuashing coughed dryly and said, "This purple gold magma is at the demigod level and has the power of a beginner god. It's not much of a threat to us. Cultivating in it can gradually make up for the flaws in the cultivation of a beginner god. The energy it provides can't help one's cultivation to advance, but it can gradually make one's body better. It's very suitable for you. I originally wanted to make you guys perfect a little, but I didn't expect to encounter transcendent energy. It saved me a lot of trouble." Splash! As soon as he finished speaking, he saw an extremely huge splash in the purple gold magma below. He was stunned, and when he turned around in a daze, he found that Yu was gone. Then, he thought of the sound of something falling in just now, and his face couldn't help but twitch. Wasn't this girl a little too impatient? Splash! A few more huge splashes sounded, making Yun Nuashing's face twitch. She shook her head helplessly and hugged the little purple soul, who was still the most obedient one. She waved her hand and made the fire phoenix dissipate. She fell down and landed on the surface of the purple gold magma. Seeing the girls cheering and playing in the water during her speech, she couldn't help but smile bitterly. Absorb the transcendent energy and let it flow through every inch of your body as much as possible. Also, don't miss out on your soul and mind. It can automatically find flaws and make up for them. As long as you expose the flaws, it'll be fine. As Yun Nuashing spoke, she looked at Chu Xianling and said, "Fairy, there's something wrong with your energy carrier. Try to soak in the transcendent energy for a longer period of time." Chu Xianling's pretty face stiffened. She didn't expect that Yun Nuashing would be able to find out that there was something wrong with her energy carrier without even checking her condition. When I was cultivating at the demonic rank, I was a little rushed. When I was advancing to the demigod rank, the energy conversion wasn't complete. I was pointed out once. Chu Xianling stuck out her little tongue and lowered her little head. "It's fine. You can make up for it here. The transcendent energy has such an effect. If you're lucky, you can even take away a strand of energy essence and integrate it into your energy carrier. It can mutate your own energy and make it purer. You might even obtain some special effect. Of course, people above the demigod rank won't have such an effect. After all, this transcendent energy is only at the demigod rank." The few of them nodded. Although the purplish gold lava was hot, they had an energy barrier supporting them and wouldn't burn their bodies. The strange energy was continuously used. The purplish gold light entered their bodies, and wherever it passed, every cell wriggled and opened their bellies to greedily devour it. A few vortexes appeared where they stood, and Zi quickly absorbed the transcendent energy. Little Moon opened her eyes and saw Yun Nuoshing floating on the surface of the lava. She couldn't help but ask, "Big brother, aren't you coming down?" "Me? The demigod transcendent energy is useless to me." Yun Nuoshing shook her head. In order to prove this, she even jumped down and buried half her body in the lava. However, Little Moon and the others didn't feel any signs of the transcendent energy surging toward him. There were no vortexes forming around him either. It seemed like he couldn't absorb the energy here. "My body has already reached the perfect demigod rank state. Even the power of the stars has long surpassed the scope of the demigod rank. These things are useless to me long ago. I can use the transcendent energy of the demigod rank though." Yun Nuoshing shrugged and floated up from the lava. She said, "I'll protect you. Cultivate as much as you can. I'll also go and collect some celestial fate. There seems to be golden celestial fate here." Little Moon and the others nodded. They took a deep breath and gradually calmed their minds and entered a state of cultivation. After coming into contact with the transcendent energy, they could clearly feel that there were many flaws in their bodies. They were all trying their best to make up for them. This was related to the higher path in the future. Chapter 1000. The purple magma kept rising and falling like boiling water, and huge bubbles appeared. Below the magma, there were a few figures sitting cross-legged. No matter how the magma moved, they remained motionless. Their bodies produced a huge attractive force, and the energy of the surrounding magma was absorbed into their bodies. Looking at the surface of the magma, one could see a huge whirlpool. However, even with such a huge absorption, the magma lake did not have the slightest change. Yun Nuoshing observed for a while, and felt that there should be no problem. Then, he flew around the surface of the magma lake to collect the star fate that emerged from the bottom of the lake. It was the golden star fate. Although it was one grade lower than the black star fate, it was still very good. This magma lake was a little too big. Even though the mountain looked very huge from the outside, the lake felt much bigger than it looked from the outside. Yun Nuoshing flew for a few minutes, but he still did not reach the edge. It seems to be space extension? After flying for a while, he could not help but stop and look around. Yun Nuoshing was slightly enlightened. He had thought that this place was really that big. The so-called space extension was to extend a space that was originally only about 10 feet wide to 10,000 feet wide. However, from the outside, that place still gave people the feeling that it was only about 10 feet wide. It was a very common method that could be easily performed by middle-ranked gods and above. As for how big it could be extended, it depended on one's ability to control and use the power of space. Well, Yu and Eurus melted star stones are all full. Fairy and Little Chen's are almost the same. Yun Nuoshing tossed the 4 pieces of melted star stones in his hand, and could not help but frown. How should he put it? He was a little dissatisfied. Although the golden star fate stone seemed to be 1 grade lower than the black star fate stone, in fact, among the last 4 colors, mixed colors were the rarest. Among them, the most common was purple-black, and the rarest was the red-black that he mentioned. A pure color was not as powerful as a mixture of 2 colors. I don't know if we will encounter other colors on the way. I'd better keep them. Yun Nuoshing sighed and looked around. Then, she shouted towards a high wave on the magma lake not far away, "Little girl, come here." The waves suddenly disappeared. Before Yun Nuoshing could see anything, he had already opened his arms. Then, a petite figure jumped into his embrace. 2 tiny arms were wrapped around his neck, and he could hear her giggling. He did not understand what Little Purple Soul was laughing about. "How do you feel?" Yun Nuoshing asked softly as she rubbed Little Purple Soul's long purple hair. Little Purple Soul giggled and climbed onto his shoulder. She raised her head and thought for a moment. Her legs were still swinging. After a while she said, "You don't feel anything?" Yun Nuoshing was not surprised by her answer. He had let the little girl try to absorb the transcendental energy, and it seemed that the result was the same. It's expected. He had never seen a soul that could emit such a strong immortal chi. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that she was an immortal spirit herself. In fact, it was even more inconceivable, hazy, and unfathomable than an immortal spirit. Even now, he still didn't know which family this little girl came from. She didn't seem to remember anything. With all these circumstances added together, he couldn't help but think, could it be that this little girl was some kind of immortal spiritual item that had gained sentience and came out to take human form? But it's impossible for a fairy to have sentience because they are too powerful. That kind of power, that kind of pure and ethereal energy, makes them lose the right to have sentience, unless they are like Violet Knight, who was given a godhead by a god and formed a godhead body. But I can't feel the power of a godhead from the little girl. Yun Nuoxing carried little purple soul on his shoulder and flew above the lava lake for a while. He shook his head and threw these random thoughts out of his head. He had been thinking about this problem for a long time, but he could not come to a conclusion. No matter how much he thought about it, it was useless. Transcendent energy at the demigod level. I wonder if it can evolve to the initial god level. I wonder if the primal chaos void array of 10,000 calamities is still there. It's filled with the transcendent energy at the initial god-emperor level. If I have the time, I should go and look for it. After returning to the place where Little Moon and the others were cultivating, Yun Nuoxing sat cross-legged in the air and observed for a while. He felt that he could not sit still anymore, so he waved his hand and set up a level 5 or 6 divine rank concealment formation. He then flew into the sky. Just as he arrived at the mouth of the volcano, he was still worried. He waved his hand and set up a total of 18 formations. Only then did he feel at ease and flew into the distance. It was a dark and boundless starry sky. Stars scattered all over the dark space. There were traces of shattering everywhere in this space. The space was torn apart and swallowed by the cracks in the void. A few stars were unfortunately swept into the cracks in the void and were swallowed by the void, disappearing without a trace. In the starry sky, Yuan Shi grimaced. His body was sore all over. He fell backward and lay on his back in the starry sky like a floating corpse. His long hair was disheveled, and his white robe was torn and tattered. There was even a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth that he was too lazy to wipe away. This was the most intense battle he had ever fought in all these years. However, it was still much weaker than the one-sided beating he got from Yun Nuoxing. It could only be said that it was a battle of equal strength. His body was about to fall apart. He had used everything he had learned, but in the end both of them were injured. Looks like my cultivation is still not enough. Yuan Shi sucked in a cold breath and turned his head. Not far away from him floated a figure. His aura was even more dispirited and weak, and his handsome face was covered in bruises. He was in a very sorry state. This person was Yi Wenlu. He no longer had the elegance and confidence he had when they first met. Right now, he seemed extremely comical. The two of them lay upright in the starry sky. Every movement caused their bodies to twitch in pain. Clearly, the battle just now had ended with both of them suffering injuries. However, Yi Wenlu's realm was a few minor realms higher than Yuan Shi's, so this battle could be considered a small victory for Yuan Shi. Unlike the tragic situation here, on the other side, Devil Nightmare was still alive and kicking in the starry sky, running here and there to collect the fate of the stars. His opponent, Yen Hua, had already fallen straight down and was supported by the thin and weak youth. It seemed that this was a one-sided victory. However, Devil Nightmare was still feeling somewhat weak. It seemed that even this madman would not be able to win this battle as easily as it seemed. He was originally a battle maniac, and had even received guidance from Yun Nuoxing. Every day, he would be trampled on the ground by Yun Nuoxing. His battle prowess was even more exaggerated. In their team, he was a battle prodigy and was estimated to be in the top 5. The only one who could directly crush him was probably Yun Nuoxing. Brother Yen. The thin and weak youth supported Yen Hua. His tone was somewhat horrified, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. The two legends in his heart, the two people who could break through anything, had been defeated at the same time today. Furthermore, they had lost to two people whose realms were lower than theirs. How could he not be shocked? Yen Hua and Yi Wenlu were people who could fight across realms, but now they had lost to two people whose realms were lower than theirs. A look of helplessness flashed across Yen Hua's boorish face. He gently shook his head, pressed his right hand on his left shoulder, and pushed with all his might to reconnect his dislocated left hand. He looked at Yi Wenlu, who was lying in the starry sky in the distance, panting incessantly. In reality, he had not even taken a single breath. There was a complicated look in his eyes. Yi Wenlu had actually lost. He had also lost. After muttering to himself for a while, Yen Hua sighed heavily. It's all right. It's just a defeat. We can get it back in the future. What's your name? He sat up slightly and looked at Nightmare, who was jumping around in the starry sky like a rabbit, and asked in a low voice. Oh? You're calling me? Are you calling me? Nightmare turned his head away, and a wild and crazy smile that did not match his handsome face appeared on his handsome face. My name is Nightmare. I'm just a nightmare. I'm someone who was defeated by the boss. Right now, I'm still cultivating, hoping that one day, I'll be able to last 10 seconds against the boss. I'm not a big deal. So please don't remember me. Yen Hua's face darkened when he saw his crazy appearance. Although there were many things in his words that were worth paying attention to, he did not think too much about it. He only nodded. Nightmare, I'll remember you. My name is Yen Hua. I'll get it back in the future. After saying that, he raised his two weak arms and cupped his hands heavily. Also, thank you for not killing me. I can't die for the time being. Ho-ho, are you protecting your boss? Your eyes are so similar to ours. It's a pity that you're a little stronger than your boss, but we're much weaker than him. Conservatively speaking, you can kill me with a snap of your fingers. Hey, my cultivation is still not enough. Why don't we fight a few more 1,000 rounds? I think you're a good opponent. You're usually beaten by the boss, and Yuan-Shi has been training with me for a long time. We're neck and neck, so I need a new opponent. Nightmare talked nonstop as soon as he opened his mouth. Yen Hua and the skinny youth were stunned. After a while, Yen Hua's face twitched, and his determined face collapsed. He helplessly shook his head. Forget it this time. I can't fight anymore. Hey, that's a pity. Next time. I'll find you next time when I'm stronger. Hey, but the boss said that the world is so big that we might not see each other again. Where can I find you in the future? Let's leave it to fate. We'll talk about it when we meet. If you're itching to fight, you're welcome to Divine Sky City in the northern wilderness of the Divine Land. You can ask someone to pass a message to me. I'll go there sometimes. But I don't have a fixed place now. How many years has it been since I went there? Oh, it's so troublesome. Forget it. Leave it to fate, leave it to fate. The skinny youth was dizzy. He was almost confused by Nightmare's words. How did this guy develop the ability to keep talking? The noise over there made Yuan-Shi, who wanted to lie down quietly, sigh bitterly. Couldn't these two guys block out the surroundings when they talked? Even the power of the soul was transmitted. After lying down for a while, he felt more comfortable. Yuan-Shi took a deep breath, sighed, and said, Hey, the one playing the guqin over there. If you have something to say, just say it. Yi Wenlu replied weakly. He wasn't as freakish as the Nightmare duo, who could sit up after fighting. He had used the strongest combat power he had ever used in his life, but in the end both sides were still injured. This made him feel a little depressed. His invincible legend had been broken. Where did you get that Celestial King battle song? Yuan-Shi gasped. The Celestial King battle song that Yi Wenlu had played during the battle had given him a fright. The powerful strength that he had displayed had left him in a terrible fix. What was even more shocking was that this guy was actually completely fine after the song ended. Didn't Little Star say that this was the self-destruction divine song? The kind that would kill 1,000 enemies but lose 1,200 of their own? Fortunately, it was the Celestial King battle song. Its auxiliary function was stronger than its combat power. If it had been another song, he might have died here. You actually know that it's the Celestial King battle song? Yi Wenlu was stunned. He abruptly turned his head, but the wound on his neck was pulled. It hurt so much that he sucked in a breath of cold air. Yuan Shi nodded stiffly and said, I have a friend who also knows the Celestial King battle song. He even played the complete. At this point, he suddenly came to a realization. So that's how it is. Your Celestial King battle song isn't complete. No wonder it didn't damage itself, so its power isn't very strong. He had heard Yun Nuoxing play a flawless Celestial King battle song before. Compared to Yi Wenlu's performance at this moment, it was far too inferior, whether it was in terms of artistic conception or other aspects. It's incomplete? When Yi Wenlu heard this, he immediately jumped up. It was as if he was on the verge of death. He sat up in shock. I played a fake song? Yuan Shi smiled bitterly and shook his head. He wasn't too sure about this. In any case, listening to his performance wasn't as comprehensive as listening to Little Star's performance. If what you played is all that you know, then it might be an incomplete Celestial King battle song. Yi Wenlu's expression was gloomy and uncertain. He stood in a daze for a long time. Then, he smiled bitterly and lay down again. He muttered to himself in his heart, this is really, the punishment for playing by accident is not getting the complete Celestial King battle song? Thinking of this, he looked at Yuan Shi, who was struggling to sit up. His mouth twitched, and he wanted to ask his friend where he had obtained the complete Celestial King battle song. However, after thinking about it, he smiled bitterly and shook his head. This kind of secret couldn't be said. It was better not to waste his breath. I'll find time to go back to the Celestial King Valley to take a look. I might have missed something. Yi Wenlu raised his head and looked at Yan Hua and Yi Wenlu. He transmitted his voice, Yan Hua, let's go. It's time to retreat since we've lost. After saying this, he looked at the reddish-black giant again. The place where the big guy had originally been was already empty. That unbelievably beautiful girl had already put it away. However, she had been watching the battle from the side and hadn't rushed up to help. If they had all come to participate in the battle, they would probably have died here. Wenlu. Yan Hua supported the thin and weak young man to come in front of him. They looked at each other and both of them sighed. He waved his hand and said, don't say anything, don't say anything. A loss is a loss. In life, it's only fun to meet one or two opponents that you can't defeat, isn't it? He looked very carefree, as if he really didn't take it to heart. Yan Hua was silent, but he saw Yi Wenlu clenching his fists. He probably wasn't as carefree as he said. He, who had never tasted defeat before, had finally encountered an extremely strong opponent here today. He had even almost died in battle. He had already done everything he could, used the Celestial King battle song, and burned all his blood, but still lost. The only thing worth rejoicing over was that he was still standing here, alive. Let's go. There are still many things to do. There's still star fate to collect, we can't stay here. Yi Wenlu laughed loudly, loosening his clenched fists. He dragged his still sore body, patted Yan Hua's shoulder, and stubbornly staggered away. Seeing the three leave dejectedly, Yuan Shi got up and looked at Nightmare, who had walked to the side, and said, Did you beat him until he lost his soul? No, no. Nightmare shook his head, saying, It was you who beat him until his soul flew away. Such a good lad. Is he going to be dispirited just like that? What a pity! I don't think so. Chu Yingzhan, Ziyan, and the other two slowly walked over. The former had watched the two battles and was rather shocked. With such a powerful force, even God King experts would have a chance of victory, unless it was a God King expert who was a little more special. The divine technique he cultivates is above divine grade, and his level of cultivation is definitely better than ours. He needs to cultivate it for a longer time, which is why you guys fought so hard. We just learned divine techniques above divine grade not long ago, and I don't think his divine technique is better than the one fool gave us. Chu Yingzhan said and stretched. Well, I can't deny that he is a strong opponent, probably not worse than the second generation on the sovereign list. Yes, he is a rare strong opponent. I hope we won't be dispirited just like that. I still want to play with them in the future. The boss is too perverted. Being beaten up all the time will leave a psychological shadow, Nightmare said sincerely. In response, Yuan Shi and the others all nodded seriously. If they wanted to increase their battle prowess the fastest, they would have to find that monster to spar with. If you had 1,000 ways of fighting, he would be able to return with 10,000 ways of fighting. It was guaranteed that he would be able to beat anyone to a pulp. If they wanted to relax and not have any psychological trauma, it would be better to find a normal person to spar with. Did you collect that big star? Yuan Shi turned his head, looked at the empty space, and gasped. Ziyan nodded. Yes, but my melt star stone wasn't enough, so I borrowed Sister Yan's. It's already full, and I even poured out all the ones I collected before. Here I am. Chu Yingzhan pointed at herself helplessly. Her melt star stone was almost full as well. After all, it was originally 3 people's worth. Hey, what's that in your hand? Yuan Shi was just about to speak when Nightmare grabbed his wrist and waved it in front of him. There was a faint pink light on the former's palm. It was very mysterious and he couldn't feel the energy density. I'm not sure. Yuan Shi was also stunned. He waved his hand in front of him and shook his head. Then, he looked at Nightmare and the others and said in surprise, You have it too. Ziyan and the others were also stunned. They raised their hands and looked at it. Only then did they realize that their hands were also covered in this pink light. After looking at it for a while, they didn't feel any danger. After thinking about it, they didn't bother to pay attention to it. Like Yun Nuoshing, Chu Yingzhan shrugged and said, Forget it, I don't care. I don't think there's any danger. Compared to this, let's hurry up and fill up your melt star stones. If we miss this opportunity, we won't get another one. We don't know how long this place can stay open, so we have to save some energy to retreat. What if we find a better quality celestial fate? Yuan Shi spread his hands. I feel that the celestial fate with color fusion seems to be stronger. Chu Yingzhan rolled her eyes. Are you stupid? Why don't you just throw away what you've collected or use it to practice when you see it? Yuan Shi thought for a while and felt that it was true. He sat down and recovered some energy. Then, he ran to other places in this star field with Nightmare to collect celestial fate. Chapter 1001. On the emerald green ground, a golden flame suddenly ignited. A figure fell from the sky, creating a huge crater on the ground. That person's face turned pale as he spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted. Clang! A metallic explosion rang out in the sky. 2 majestic bursts of energy appeared out of thin air, blowing up a large piece of space. A terrifying storm of energy swept out and covered half the sky. The large-scale explosion of energy only lasted for an instant before disappearing. Golden flames poured down from the sky like a rain of fire. A whirlpool of several hundred meters suddenly appeared in the sea of fire. A figure shot out from it, tumbling through the air in a wretched manner. After a long time, he retreated several thousand meters before coming to a stiff stop. The golden flames on his body almost swallowed him whole. The golden sea of flames parted, and an incomparably holy figure walked out with her bare feet raised. Behind her was a pair of pure white wings that were about 10 feet wide. Under the illumination of the sea of flames, they revealed a golden color. That pair of bright golden eyes stared at the person below without the slightest trace of emotion. Her beautiful eyes narrowed slightly. The person's heart lurched as he instinctively felt an extreme sense of danger. He dodged to the right, but even though he reacted extremely quickly, a gigantic streak of golden light appeared out of thin air just as he pulled away. It rumbled through the air in front of him and directly cut off his left hand from the shoulder. Chi-la! Ugh! The person grunted in pain. His face twisted from the pain. He ignored his severed arm and covered the smooth cut with his right hand. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blue air, hurriedly enveloping himself. Boom! As soon as the blue air enveloped him, a golden pillar of fire arrived unexpectedly. In the blink of an eye, it came from extremely far away, piercing through the blue mist and dispersing it. However, it was empty. The person from before had already disappeared. Ming's figure appeared beside the blue mist. Mei Mao glanced at the empty space indifferently. Her red lips curled into a mocking smile. He ran away? Do you really think you can escape so easily? Bing Air, he ran towards you. I'll leave that guy to you. You don't have to bring him back. In the sky thousands of miles away, a cloud of blue mist appeared out of thin air, and an extremely sorry figure emerged from it. The area between the lower abdomen and the chest had been burned by the golden flames, piercing through from the front to the back. No blood flowed out from the wound, and the blood vessels had been burned to charcoal by the sacred flames. It seemed that even though he had run quickly, he had not been able to completely avoid the attack. Damn it, that woman, that monster! He took a deep breath. Judging from his appearance, he was the one who had tried to intimidate Yun Nuoxing in the Myriad Beast Pavilion. Hiss! He sucked in a breath of cold air so hard that his teeth almost fell out. His body swayed from the sky and fell to the ground like a bird with broken wings. Damn it! Once I've recovered, I'll call for more people. I'll pin that woman to the ground and ravage her. He sucked in a breath of cold air, and his eyes were filled with hatred. Even his holy and pure appearance could not extinguish the anger in his heart. Right now, he only wanted to torture that woman to death with his own hands. Pervert! This combat power is much stronger than the people on the Supreme Martial Artist leaderboard. Even the Supreme Martial Artist of the previous generation might not be as powerful as her. Looks like I'll have to find someone more reliable. As he spoke, another layer of cold sweat appeared on his forehead. He had been holding a grudge over what had happened in the pavilion. He knew that Ming was related to Yun Nuoxing, so he had taken advantage of the chaos on the battlefield to bring a large group of people to surround and annihilate her. He had wanted to teach her a lesson, but he had not expected that he would be the only one left. Oh, why did Father say that? Just as he was thinking about how to kill that woman, a cold voice that sounded like it came from the depths of hell suddenly rang out not far away from him, causing him to shiver from the cold. He jerked his head around and froze. He did not know when it had started snowing heavily, but the cold air of winter had caused the ground to freeze. Other than snowflakes, there were also fist-sized ice crystals floating in the sky. A beautiful girl was gently touching those ice crystals with her bare hands. Her blue-gold eyes blinked innocently as she looked at him. She was frowning as if she was thinking about something. Ah, so that's what he said. After a moment, she understood and her expression suddenly became fierce. The ice crystals that filled the sky condensed into ice spears that pointed at the man from afar. She said coldly, "I'm sorry, but you won't have that chance. The snowflakes between heaven and earth will create your grave. I won't release you, I won't give you any blessings. I will only bring you the coldest death." That was the last sentence he heard. He could not help but widen his eyes in horror. He wanted to say something, but he could no longer hear. The frost climbed up his body and froze his life force. Gradually, he became an ice sculpture that froze in the sky. He fell silently to the ground in the blizzard and shattered into ice shards. Looking at the ice sculpture expressionlessly, the coldness on Bing Er's face gradually dissipated. She scratched her head. Something doesn't seem right? Because Father said it with great power. Bing Er pouted and shook her head in dissatisfaction. Why does it sound weird when I say it? Is it because I don't have that kind of temperament? Mei Mao still shone with an innocent light. She felt that it was very awkward to say it out loud. It was probably very difficult for her to understand how Yun Nuoxing felt when he said those words. No one could replicate his feelings at that time. After thinking hard for a while, Bing Er muttered and waved her hand. She walked away with light step. She kept muttering in her heart, "It's so hard to imitate Father. In the future, I should learn from Sister Xian and the others." The tall figure gradually disappeared in the blizzard. As she disappeared, the blizzard suddenly stopped. The ground was not frozen and was still green. There was no witness to what had just happened. It was like an illusion. However, the pile of ice shards on the ground made it clear that it was not an illusion. Everything that had just happened was real. Sister Bing Er, have you solved the problem on your side? Bing Er returned to Ming's side. Mei Mao looked around and saw Qin Yu and the others who had just left to deal with the others. Not long after entering the divine miracle, Shi and Ming met this group of people. Because of Yun Nuoxing, they naturally gathered together. When they were attacked just now, Qin Yu and the others shared a large part of the pressure. Ming said that she did not need help. With her godly emperor-level strength and the divine-level divine technique, it was not a problem for her to kill a divine king. However, because of Yun Nuoxing, the others still enthusiastically ran over to help. This saved the two girls a lot of effort. Therefore, Ming smiled faintly to unfamiliar people. Bing Er made a "no problem" gesture and smiled. Then, she looked at the others and said angrily, "After being chased for 2 days, they really think that we are afraid of them. If Father, Sister Ming did not say to ignore those maggots, I would have frozen them into ice sculptures and skewered them. But it seems that the problem is not solved yet." Ming calmly looked behind her and raised her jade-like hand. The pink glow on her palm shone on her beautiful face. It was pink and rather cute. "Well, we are all qualified to enter the final place. But there are very few qualified people in the King of Gods area. There are more people there, so the competition is more intense. There are other strong cultivators at the godly emperor level. If those people attack us, we can only run." The war emperor shrugged his shoulders helplessly. Even though he was the supreme being of the Kuan Yuan generation, he was not afraid of ordinary divine emperors. However, if his opponent was also an expert of the same level, then it was hard to say. After the initial god level, the gap between each level was very obvious, and it was directly related to one's strength. Except for some people who cultivated to the strongest state in each level and could continue to fight, the rest could only be ordinary. Ho Ming turned around and looked at the chaotic battlefield. A strange plant had appeared there, and it split into 8 parts. Obtaining one of them would allow one to obtain the right to enter the final destination. Their group had obtained 4 of them, and they had charged out just now. While they were at it, they had also gotten rid of those people. Let's retreat quickly before the shockwaves reach us. If we get surrounded and enter a protracted battle, it will be very disadvantageous for us. Qingyu and the others also nodded, and the group of people rushed towards the distance, disappearing into the horizon in a flash. Those who were paying attention to this side and hesitating whether or not to come over saw this, gnashed their teeth in hatred, but the others had already gone far away, and it was impossible for them to chase after them. They could only helplessly shake their heads and rush back to the battlefield to fight. There were still 3 left, and no matter what, they had to snatch one. It was a mountainous area. The starry sky reflected the majestic mountains. The mountains were at least 2,000 feet high. If one stood at the bottom and looked up, It was as if they reached the starry sky. Roar, countless roars sounded in the mountainous forest, shaking the forest. They sounded very fierce, but there was a hint of grievance in those roars. Yun Nuashing sat on the huge curved tooth of the giant beast on top of a meat mountain that was a few feet high. She tossed a fist-sized melted star stone in her hand. When she heard the low cries under her butt, she could not help but roll her eyes. She softly said, "What are you shouting for? I just took the star fate that you were guarding. Do you want to try dying? Why don't you shout for me again?" Then all the beasts shut up. They were all frightened by the supreme aura on her body. Although part of the reason was that they were scared of being beaten up. Looking at the star fate stored in the melted star stone, Yun Nuashing curled her lips in disdain. "It's orange. I really don't want it even if you give it to me. If it didn't have some other special uses, I wouldn't even bother to pick it up when it falls on the ground." The group of demonic beasts wanted to cry, but no tears came out. She took their most precious thing and hid it well. In the end, she even said that she didn't like this fart thing at all. If she didn't like it, then don't snatch it. What? Do you have any objections? Stand up if you have any objections. Hearing the weak voices, Yun Nuashing put her hands on her waist and let out a long breath. Then she grinned. All the beasts shuddered violently and quickly shut their mouth. They did not dare to voice out the small voices in their hearts. They were afraid that this demon king would hear them and kill them all in a fit of anger. After a while, another group of demonic beasts rushed over with balls of star fate of different sizes. They climbed to the bottom of the giant mountain and threw the star fate to Yun Nuashing. Then they crawled to the side and trembled, not daring to raise their heads. "Relax, relax. Don't be so nervous. I want your star fate not to kill you. Although killing you will also give you star fate, it's only blue in quality. It's a little worse than orange. It's the same as not having it." Yun Nuashing waved her hand and said softly. Hearing this, the group of demonic beasts heaved a sigh of relief. The entire mountain shook. They were really afraid that this demon king would kill them all in a fit of anger. It was not that he would not do that. Those who resisted at the beginning had already turned into balls of star fate and were absorbed into the melted star stone. Phew, so boring. Yun Nuashing stretched her body and hugged Little Purple Soul on her shoulder. She turned around and hugged her like a rag doll. "Is there nothing fun to do? The demonic beasts in this mountain range are too weak. Brother clearly said that he would protect Sister Yu and the others. Why did he come out to play?" Little Purple Soul muttered and stretched out her two little hands to pinch his face. The magic formation I left there can feed back all the abnormal situations to me. It's fine even if I'm not there." Yun Nuashing shrugged. Even if he came out to play, it would not take long for him to go back. With the speed of his light element, he was not afraid that he would not be able to catch up. It seemed that the last time in the Yin-Yang world was like this. In the end, because he underestimated the enemy, he was tortured to death. Although it was not because he did not make it in time, it would have been much easier if he was by his side at that time. Thinking of this, his cheeks twitched. After thinking for a while, he shook his head and raised his head. It did not feel good to go back. After all, guarding was too boring. This was all work that consumed one's patience. Anyway, he did not think that anyone in this divine miracle could break his 18 layers of magic formations. And even if someone was bored enough to break his magic formation, he would feel that this place was not very big when he first started to break it. He just had to not go too far, so there was no need to rush back. Just when he was bored to death, he suddenly felt a commotion in the distance. This commotion made his expression change slightly. He could not help but look over. His eyes gradually surged with blue light. Then, he saw that in the distance, a group of people was flying towards here. They were not slow. Roar. Woo-woo. A magical beast came from afar. As soon as it roared, it fell to the ground and dissipated into a cloud of starlight. Yun Nuoxing was stunned. What was this? Did it come to inform him before it died? Oh, it's a bit interesting. Are they coming for me? Oh no, they are coming for this mountain range? Yun Nuoxing stroked his chin. Originally, there was a magical beast that was comparable to the elementary god level in the valley of this mountain range. A group of demigod-level people gathered there. They definitely didn't come here to play, and it was impossible for them to deal with some demigod-level magical beast. In this way, they probably came for the elementary god-level magical beast. Unfortunately, it was killed by him in advance. Woo-woo! A small beast that was crawling at his feet raised its head and looked at him with its small eyes full of expectation. This made him a little speechless. Just now, the one that came to inform him had already let the thousands of magical beasts gathered here know what had happened. But to be honest, this number of magical beasts was not enough to fill the gaps between the teeth of the large group of demigod-level experts. They could be killed in one round of attack. What, little guy, do you want me to help you? Yun Nuoxing said with a faint smile. He picked up the small beast and placed it on his knees. He sized it up and said, "But, no matter how you look at my appearance, I still look like a human." "Oh, I am not a human. Well, although I have a soul link with Feng so I can use her power, this does not mean that I am your king. In fact, I have killed many magical beasts." Woo-woo. That cute small beast looked very depressed. Its beautiful black eyes lost their color. It lowered its little head and made some unclear whimpering sounds. Suddenly, this cute small beast's ears stood up. It flapped its wings twice and climbed up Yun Nuoxing's clothes to his shoulder. It stuck out its little tongue and licked his forehead. It mumbled something. "Is there a fun place?" Yun Nuoxing's eyes suddenly flashed. He grinned and said, "All right, since you said that, I will stay here for the time being. And if you lie to me..." Yun Nuoxing smiled sinisterly. The smile caused the little beast to have a few layers of goosebumps. That gaze was too frightening. Although it looked soft, it was 100% certain that it was only sizing up its few kilograms of fat and thin. Numerous magical beasts sighed in their hearts. They all cast admiring gazes towards this little beast. It actually dared to negotiate terms with this great devil. It was truly courageous. However, when it came to fun places, the only place that could interest such a character like him was probably that place. This was truly infuriating. That place was originally exclusively enjoyed by the magical beasts, but now it was woo-woo-woo-woo. At this moment, Little Magic jumped down from Little Purple Soul's head. He bit a lock of Yun Nuoxing's long hair with his little mouth and pulled it. He then jumped up and down on Yun Nuoxing's head. "You little ball, you eat and drink my food, and now you want to stretch your arms out?" Hearing Little Magic's words, Yun Nuoxing was both angry and amused. This little guy actually wanted him to treat this group of magical beasts well? These magical beasts were not real chi, they were just the incarnations of the power of the stars and had a little bit of intelligence. Why should he care so much about them? Yun Nuoxing grabbed Little Magic from his head and pinched its round face with both hands. As he pulled and pulled, he and Little Purple Soul could not help but laugh. This little guy was like dough. While the few of them were fooling around, a rumbling sound rapidly approached from afar. When they turned around, they could see a large group of figures rushing over from the distant sky. They were only the size of sesame seeds, and in less than a minute, they arrived outside the mountain range. "You are quite cautious," Yun Nuoxing sneered. Their eyes met for a minute. He was at the most conspicuous place in the entire mountain range. Therefore, everyone's attention was focused on him in an instant. Swoosh! Figures rushed over and slowly stopped outside the mountain range. They saw a group of magical beasts stacked up like a human pyramid on the ground. There were also many magical beasts bowing their heads and worshipping them at the side of the Beast Mountain. The source of all these magical beasts seemed to be the person at the top of the mountain, The person with his back facing everyone had a head of colorful hair that fluttered in the wind. He was as ethereal as an immortal. It was unbelievable because he had a human form but was worshipped by so many magical beasts. He also made everyone's hair stand on end because he was very dangerous. There was an extremely terrifying aura coming from his body. Upon closer inspection, the magical beasts' bodies seemed to be trembling slightly. Was it because they were being pressured by his aura? Yun Nuoshing leaned back and slowly turned his head. He smiled sweetly at everyone. His voice was like the sound of nature, but it sent chills down everyone's spine. There is nothing here that you are looking for. Go back or stay here. Chapter 1002. There's nothing here that you're looking for. Go back. This place is now temporarily occupied by me. Yun Nuoshing grinned. That harmless and beautiful smile bewitched many people, but when that slightly cold voice landed in everyone's ears, it caused them to feel a chill down their spines. In addition to that faintly discernible black aura that floated in the air, that pressure, that might, caused everyone to break out in cold sweat. The person at the front of the team gave a look to the person beside him and pointed at Yun Nuoshing below. The demigod rank 8 team member's expression changed slightly. He nodded and walked out with a grave expression. Yun Nuoshing looked at him with a smile for a while before retracting his gaze. He sat up slightly and the aura on his body became denser. When that team member walked to 100 feet in front of the beast horde, an extremely violent aura suddenly erupted in the air, causing the entire mountain range to tremble violently. The demigod rank 8 team member's face turned pale, and he turned to run without hesitation. Bang! However, the moment that team member turned around, an extremely black lightning glow appeared in the air. It suddenly flashed and smashed onto the back of that team member. A burst of lightning glow exploded, and that team member's back was charred black. A mouthful of fresh blood was wildly spat out. His body was sent flying by that enormous force, disappearing into the horizon like lightning. Chi-la! Black lightning danced on Yun Nuoshing's colorful hair, and it gradually calmed down. However, an increasingly violent energy continued to emerge from his body, causing everyone to sweat profusely. You're too overbearing. This world doesn't belong to you alone. The team leader frowned and said coldly. Indeed. Yun Nuoshing thought about it seriously and nodded. Then, may I ask, what are you looking for here? It has nothing to do with you. You just need to leave this place. The team leader raised his head arrogantly and said. Yun Nuoshing could not help but sneer at his words. He shook his head and was not angry. He continued to smile faintly and said, If that's the case, then please leave. After all, you were the ones who didn't cooperate first. I don't need to cooperate with you. Are you courting death? Rebuttal. I'll return the same words to you. Do you want your team members to die? Or? Yun Nuoshing retracted her smile and looked at the crowd indifferently. Or do you want to stay here as well? The moment his voice fell, an even colder and more terrifying aura suddenly filled the space. It was incomparably cold and infinitely terrifying. The aura made everyone tremble in fear. Their legs trembled, but no one retreated. Even though their eyes were filled with fear, no one took a step back. What a surprise! I didn't expect that someone who is naturally afraid of death could actually last so long under my aura. Yun Nuoshing was slightly surprised. Then, she smiled inexplicably. It seems that the thing you're pursuing is worth your lives. He strengthened his aura and pressure again. A few of the people standing in the front row could not take it anymore. Their clothes were soaked in sweat, but they still clenched their teeth and held on. There seemed to be a glimmer of hope in their eyes, as if they were sizing up something. Yun Nuoshing looked at this group of people. He tossed the small beast in his hand and placed it on his shoulder. Then, he slowly stood up. It seems that you haven't given up yet. Do you think that you can kill me with a few hundred people standing here? Do you want to pile me to death? It seems that no one has taught you that sometimes, numbers will only give you an illusion and affect your judgment. Yun Nuoshing's long hair slowly fluttered behind him. The 12 elements gathered to form a black lightning bolt around his body. His eyes were cold and emotionless. Even though there were a few hundred people standing in front of him, he did not seem to be affected at all. He had killed tens of thousands of people. In the ancient times, he had even killed trillions of lives. He had long since stopped caring about the so-called race. Just as his aura reached its peak and he was about to attack, someone in the group finally could not take the pressure anymore. Unable to suppress the fear in their hearts, that person shouted in panic, "Wait a minute." Yun Nuoshing narrowed his eyes and retracted his aura. He turned around and realized that it was a woman. She was so frightened by his aura that her face turned pale. At this moment, her body could not help but tremble slightly. He raised his chin at the woman, indicating that she could speak. The woman clenched her fists. Her eyes were a little unfocused. When he looked at her, she clearly felt the pressure on her body decrease. Only then did she realize that her body was filled with an aura of death. She did not know when she had been so close to death. We came here to find. Shut up. Before she could finish, the team leader frowned and shouted, "Those who leak the information will be expelled from the team and will be hunted down by all of us. Have you forgotten?" Noisy. Yun Nuoshing snorted coldly. A monstrous force surged out of his body and blasted directly at the team leader. The team leader's expression changed drastically. He hurriedly condensed his energy in front of him. Just as he managed to condense an energy barrier, the impact of the energy came unexpectedly. Bang! A loud shattering sound rang out, causing everyone's eardrums to tremble. They blinked, and when they opened their eyes again, they saw that the captain's energy barrier had shattered. The energy fragments of the barrier pierced into his body at an extremely fast speed, leaving hundreds of wounds. Then, the energy fragments began to dissipate. Originally, after the energy barrier shattered, the fragments would not last for more than 0.01 seconds. However, in that short moment, the fragments had been blasted away, severely injuring the captain. Some of the fragments had even pierced through his body, causing him to bleed profusely. Bang! At this moment, the monstrous force slammed into the team leader, causing him to spit out a large mouthful of blood. Several dents appeared in front of his body. His body flew out like an arrow and disappeared into the horizon, just like that person at the beginning. Yun Nuoshing clenched his fists. There will always be a lot of deaths in this world. Many of them died because they talked too much. If you understand, then hurry up and get lost. That shout, which was mixed with violent energy, rang in everyone's ears. It was deafening, causing everyone to be dumbfounded. They originally wanted to retreat when they saw that the strongest team leader was sent flying with a single blow. At this moment, they were scared out of their wits by Yun Nuoshing's powerful aura. They did not care why they came here in the first place. They hurriedly turned around and ran away. The speed at which they ran away made the group of beasts sigh. That great demon's voice was really good. He could scare off so many people with just one shout. After everyone had left, Yun Nuoshing stretched and covered his mouth as he yawned. He was just about to ask that small beast where that place was when he saw a trembling figure floating in the sky in front of him. He took a closer look and realized that it was the woman who spoke just now. She was staring at him with her bright eyes. Yun Nuoshing was slightly taken aback. He tilted his head and asked in confusion, "Your companions have all run away. Why are you still here?" The woman shuddered and hurriedly shrank back. "But I haven't finished talking just now." Yun Nuoshing and Little Purple Soul were speechless. This woman was quite powerful. His face twitched. Because the crowd had all left, Yun Nuoshing retracted his aura. He waved his hand weakly and said softly, "That's enough, that's enough. There's no need, that beginner god-level magical beast in the mountain range, did you kill it?" The woman took a deep breath and interrupted him. She looked at the group of magical beasts below, then looked towards Yun Nua planet with a pensive expression. Yun Nuashing nodded. He would still respond properly to those who were willing to speak properly. Like other people who were crazy the moment they came up, he couldn't be bothered to pay attention to them. It's like this. Look at those little things below. They were originally the magical beasts of this mountain range. When I came here to play, I accidentally bumped into their boss. I accidentally killed him, and then this happened. Hearing what he said, the woman's expression became slightly strange. He was not as scary as before. Just now, she really felt that the energy in her body was about to be frozen. She had not seen many middle-level gods who had such a terrifying aura. Moreover, he was only a demigod. Feeling that he was not as scary as before, the woman's tone became more normal. We are here to find that beginner god-level magical beast. It has an item on its body. If we can get it, we can get the qualification to enter the final destination. However, this is only one of the reasons. That item is related to another place. We need that item to open it. Yun Nuashing was a little surprised. He turned his gaze to the small beast on his shoulder and said, "Is what she said true?" That little beast nodded its head very seriously, indicating that place was related to the place it said it would bring him to. This made him feel even more astonished. He couldn't help but look at that woman and said, "Why are you telling me this?" The woman was stunned and almost cried. Didn't you ask me to say this?" Yun Nuashing was stunned again. All right, this was indeed what he had asked him to say, but he did not expect it to be such a matter, and he felt that there must be something wrong with this girl. Or perhaps she was an obedient girl from some family, the kind that had been unusually obedient since young, and probably did not even know that she had been kidnapped. Yun Nuashing took out something from the pendant. It looked like a beast's tooth. It was the size of a palm. He took it out and waved it in front of the small beast. "Is this it?" The little guy stretched its neck and sniffed it with its little nose. After a while, it nodded seriously. Yun Nuashing smiled faintly. This was the only special item that he found from that beginner god-level big guy. As for the qualification to enter the final destination, he already had it. He probably would not be able to tell if there was another item. Yun Nuashing tilted his head and looked at the uneasy woman floating in the sky. He thought for a while and waved his hand to throw out a piece of melting star stone. It was filled with some light purple star fate. It was not very useful to him, and was not full. "Here you go. The star fate here is quite high quality. Of course, if you have something of a higher quality, just pretend I didn't say anything. Anyway, I don't need these anymore. You can do whatever you want with them." In the end, he added another sentence in his heart. "Just treat it as a reward for the information you provided." Although he might find out about it later when he goes there himself. The woman took the melting star stone in a flurry and raised her head in astonishment. She indeed found that Yun Nuashing had disappeared from the Beast Mountain. She could not help but be stunned and muttered, "What a strange guy. He was so fierce just now, but he suddenly became gentle. Strange, strange. Be careful that you won't be able to get married. Humph." As she muttered, she glanced at the star fate in the melting star stone and was shocked. The quality of this star fate was much higher than what she had collected. It was not on the same level at all. She originally thought that the unwanted, he said, was some low-quality star fate. She did not expect that. What a strange fellow indeed. At this time, Yun Nuashing, who had flown hundreds of miles away, naturally could not hear the woman's muttering. He had already crossed a long distance with the small beast and stopped in the depths of the mountain range. The small beast landed from Yun Nuashing's shoulder and walked around. Then, it pulled Yun Nuashing around the mountain forest and entered a cave after a while. Yun Nuashing was not worried that this little fellow would bring him to some dangerous place. In any case, even if this place was really dangerous, it probably would not be able to kill him. He calmly followed the little fellow into the cave. There is a strange smell here. How should I put it? Yun Nuoshing thought for a while and suddenly clapped his hands. It smells like barbecue! Barbecue! Where? When it came to barbecue, the little purple soul became excited. It hung on Yun Nuoshing's shoulder and jumped up and down. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. This little foodie. He shook his head helplessly. He said that it smelled like barbecue, but it only smelled like barbecue. The only thing he was sure of was that the source of this smell definitely had nothing to do with barbecue. There were many strange marks in the cave. It was strange because Yun Nuoshing could not identify what these marks were left behind. He also did not know what these marks represented. Yun Nuoshing's palm touched the strange scratches that were as small as words. His eyes flashed slightly. He did not identify anything, but he felt a very familiar smell from these scratches. It was the smell of divine essence, the energy used by later god-level experts. Could this place have something to do with a god? But this place was left behind by an ancient life form. Logically speaking, no one should have found this place. Divine essence should be a unique energy used by later god-level experts in the realm of the god. Moreover, this is an area of the demigod level. Why would there be the smell of divine essence? After walking for a while, he saw a very clear line of runes on the wall of the cave. Yun Nuoshing looked carefully and frowned slightly. The smell of divine essence is the same, but I don't understand what it is trying to say. In his opinion, these marks were more like the scribbles of some children. As he went further, he saw more of these marks and runes. At first, they were sparse at the entrance of the cave, but the deeper he went, the denser the runes and marks became. In the end, they formed circles in the cave. They were engraved on the ceiling and the ground. However, these runes no longer had any power. The divine essence that was left behind was so weak that it could be ignored. It was like a mark left for someone to see. The mark is broken here. After walking to a certain place, the circles of runes and messy marks on the surrounding stone walls had disappeared. The cave had also become much more spacious. It could roughly accommodate 20 people walking side by side. At this moment, in the same circle on the surrounding stone walls, there were 6 runes of the same size and shape. What a strange fellow! He left behind something that even I can't understand. Yun Nuoshing put his hands on his hips in annoyance. Fortunately, the divine essence in these runes was not released. Otherwise, he would not have been able to walk in so easily today. Well, although the great origin realm is boundless and I am not omniscient and omnipotent, I more or less feel that I should have a complete understanding of the later god level. Sighing and scratching his head, Yun Nuoshing felt a little helpless. He did not expect to encounter something that he could not understand. There were so many runes and marks on the walls. Other than confirming the existence of divine essence, he could not get any more information. There were no special runes deduced from the god's statue. There were no traces of divine essence left behind by the god's statue. Perhaps more clues had melted away with the passage of time. These were all unknown. The only thing that he could be sure of was that a later god-level expert had stepped into this place. In this demigod's territory, this was almost impossible. This place is suppressed by powerful rules. Later god-level experts should not be able to enter. Even if they entered the divine miracle, they should have gone to the area where the divine kings and divine emperors were. Hey, it can't be a ghost, right? Yun Nuoshing held Little Purple Soul in his hands and walked around the cave step by step. The small beast jumped on his head and shook its head along with him. It had already brought Yun Nuoshing here. It was just curious and wanted to go deeper to take a look. After all, there was usually a beginner god-level magical beast guarding this place. No one dared to come here. If they trespassed, they would be eaten. After a while, Yun Nuoshing suddenly stopped in his tracks. His colorful pupils contracted slightly, and all the hair on his body stood on end. Little Purple Soul also let out a small cry and quickly shrank into Yun Nuoxing's arms. Little Magic directly used Yun Nuoxing's long hair to curl itself up, pretending that it did not exist. The small beast was expressionless. It had not reacted yet. Yun Nuoxing's cheeks twitched violently. Not far in front of them, about 10 feet away, there was a figure emitting white light floating about a foot above the ground. The figure was wearing a white robe and had long white hair. With his back facing them, he did not look like a normal person at first glance. With his realm and vision, he had long known that the so-called ghosts were just souls that had died in places with dense yin-qi and were recondensed by the yin-qi. Although they still had part of their consciousness when they were alive, most of them were souls that were muddle-headed and had no consciousness. These were just low-level ghosts. Those with powerful souls could continue to exist without dissipating even if their physical bodies were destroyed. In any case, the so-called ghosts were related to souls. However, the figure in front of them that was emitting white light and did not look normal at all. That fellow did not even have a trace of soul energy. Naturally, it did not have any vitality. Demons, ghosts leave. Demons, ghosts leave. A trembling voice came from his arms, startling Yun Nuoxing. He lowered his head and saw Little Purple Soul's small body trembling. Little Purple Soul closed her eyes and held a lock of his long hair in front of her as she faced the figure emitting white light. Yun Nuoxing did not know whether to laugh or cry. He was not an object that could ward off evil spirit. It was useless for her to hold onto his long hair. "What the hell is that in front of us?" Yun Nuoxing shouted. Of course, the ghost did not respond to him. Chapter 1003. The mysterious figure that was emitting white light had its back facing Yun Nuoxing and the others. It was silent and its white hair fluttered in the wind. In this place, it really looked like a ghost. Especially when Yun Nuoxing could not feel its soul power or any signs of life, the level of strangeness increased exponentially. Yun Nuoxing was on high alert. Just as he was about to take out something to defend himself, the white figure slowly turned around and faced them sideways. Without making a sound, the white figure pointed at the depths of the cave. It seemed to be doing this on purpose so that Yun Nuoxing and the others could see it, indicating for them to move forward. After that, the figure disappeared, just like how it appeared silently. Yun Nuoxing was stunned. He quickly ran to the spot where the figure was standing and looked around, but he did not see anything. He then grabbed the small beast and asked, "Is there such a strange thing in here?" The small beast tilted its head and looked confused. He felt helpless. This group of little things did not usually have the chance to come in here, so naturally, they would not know what was inside. After looking at the spot for a while, he didn't see anything fishy, and there was nothing left on the spot. Yun Nuoxing frowned slightly. "Let's continue forward, maybe we'll know what's here when we get inside." Little Purple Soul hugged Little Magic tightly in her arms. The meatball was almost squeezed into a gourd, but she was still very nervous. It seemed that even though she was a fairy, as long as she maintained the mentality of a child, she would still be afraid of ghosts. The size of the cave was fixed at the back, and there were no more traces or runes inside. It seemed to have become ordinary, and the smell of barbecued meat had disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by the smell of starlight. White and orange dots were imprinted on the surrounding stone walls and ground. They were like specks of starlight and they were very bright. It was difficult for people not to notice them. Yun Nuoxing also saw those specks of starlight at a glance. However, the reason was not because they were too bright. It was purely because those specks of white starlight really had the power of stars, and it attracted someone whose entire body was filled with the power of stars. I'm more and more convinced that this place has something to do with that ancient life. No one else can come in here. Yun Nuoxing narrowed his eyes when he saw the dots of starlight. When he first saw the traces of runes, he already had some guesses. Now that he saw the dots of starlight in the cave, His guesses were a lot more certain. However, he now needed evidence to verify his guesses. Perhaps there was something deep in the cave, or rather, he might have already seen it. Yun Nuoshing stopped walking. His eyes widened slightly. It was not because of shock, but because he was slightly surprised that there was a temple in this place. It might be a bit of an exaggeration to call it a temple because it was very small. There were only 2 walls on the left and right that were embedded in the stone walls as if they were protruding from the stone walls. Facing Yun Nuoshing's direction, there was a wall that was not closed. The 2 walls were made of an unknown material. They were only 10 feet tall and 10 feet long, and they were also 10 feet apart from each other. This place that was not closed by the wall had a tattered lid. It looked like an ancient temple. In the middle of the ancient temple, there was a wooden shrine that was 1 meter tall. The shrine, which was originally very small, appeared even more pocket-sized here. It was used to place the statues of gods and Buddhas only half an arm's distance away from each other. It was simple, unadorned, and decayed. There was an ancient feeling everywhere. The walls and ground of the ancient temple flickered with endless starlight. It was as if a path of starlight was about to appear. The shrine was where the starlight gathered. Starlight, a temple, and a shrine. Yun Nuoshing had a strange expression on his face. This was the first time he had seen such a layout. Why is there such a strange ancient temple? It was not like he had never seen temples and ancient temples before. There were similar existences in the realm of the gods as well. It was just that there were fewer of them. However, he did not expect that there would be an ancient temple with the starry sky as its background in this godforsaken place. It was like a child unconsciously imitating something that he had seen before. After he was done, he did not forget to add in the elements that he liked. Then, this strange starry sky ancient temple was created. The strangeness index was 5 stars. Speaking of the child, he felt that his thoughts were more or less confirmed. However, he did not have any conclusive evidence, so he could only say that it was a guess. He could not feel the presence of time in this place. It was as if time had stopped here. There were no traces of time left in this place. The divine miracle was a well-hidden and mysterious place. This place was even more mysterious. That ancient life form. Yun Nuoshing smacked his lips. After thinking about it, he felt that it was better not to jump to conclusions so easily. When he reached the final destination, everything might be clear. If there was really something important left there, Yun Nuoshing carefully walked into the ancient starry sky temple. He finished measuring the place in just 2 steps. He focused his gaze on the shrine that was only 1 meter tall. He could see the traces of energy and the starlight gathering towards the shrine. There seemed to be nothing but gravel on the ground. He could vaguely see that this starry sky temple was extraordinary when it was in good condition. He wondered what had happened to it that caused it to be so dilapidated. Little Purple Spirit's eyes were sharp. She seemed to have noticed something, and started to struggle in Yun Nuoshing's arms. Seeing that, he immediately placed the little girl on the ground. He knew that this little girl was very mystical, and could occasionally discover things that even he could not. Little Purple Soul placed little magic on his head, and ran behind the shrine. She squatted down and dug at the ground with her little hands. After a while, she dug out a long and flat Bodhi seed. There were spots on the surface of the Bodhi seed. Its surface was covered by a layer of soil, and its color was even darker. The part that was exposed above the soil was almost completely covered. Yun Nuoshing did not notice it, but the mischievous little girl who was always looking around noticed it. This Bodhi seed was 1 size bigger than the others. It was as long as an index finger. Some of the starlight in the surroundings fell on the Bodhi seed and was absorbed by it. However, it still did not shine. Yun Nuoshing took the Bodhi seed from the little girl and wiped it clean with the corner of his clothes. He looked at it carefully and did not find anything special about it. However, it seemed to be able to cause some changes in this place. Perhaps it had other uses. That's strange. Did that ancient life form come from a place with Buddha? Yun Nuoshing said in a strange tone. The origin of Buddhism was not in the realm of the god. It seemed to be from a foreign place. As for where it came from, he did not know. During the primordial era, Buddhism was deeply rooted in the realm of the god. Although it did not develop to the level of the Nine Shrine, it had many followers scattered all over the realm of the god. Those who did not know would not even know that the Buddhists in the realm of the gods were actually from the same sect. It seemed that some of the followers did not know and thought that there were other branches. He had used the Book of the Epochs to investigate in the primordial era. However, it was disturbed and did not find the origin of Buddhism. He only knew that they came from outside the realm of the god. After that, he did not pay attention to this matter. After all, they did not interact with each other, and there was no need to find them. Even after the Nine Shrine was established, he did not pay attention to them because they were not a threat. He did not expect that there would be some interaction here. Unexpectedly, he did not think so. He only felt that it was a wrong intuition. Holding the Bodhi seed in his hand, he could hear some benevolent, solemn, profound, and extremely vast Zen sounds. It seemed to be able to cleanse the filth in his soul and wash away the mortal world. He felt that this small ancient temple was bathed in a strange holy light. Perhaps Buddhism has quite a bit of influence in other places of life, especially in the middle plane and the lower plane. They should also be existences in the upper plane, but I've never heard of any particular world where the power of faith is prevalent. Yun Nuoshing took a deep breath and put away the Bodhi seed. He shook his head. This power was useless to him and the people of the realm of the gods. They did not have that kind of faith. They were people who kept climbing. They were their own gods. They did not need to rely on faith to gain power. They just needed to keep moving forward and climbing towards the peak. No matter how the realm of the gods was now, it would always be the first major world in the 8 elemental realms. This would never change in the past, present, or even in the future. Little Purple Soul played around on the ground for a while. Other than the Bodhi seed, she could not find anything else. She grumbled and returned to Yun Nuoshing's side in disappointment. She wiped her hands clean and then grabbed the corner of Yun Nuoshing's clothes. The little girl knew that Yun Nuoshing was a clean freak, and he would occasionally have episodes of that. Yun Nuoshing looked at the altar where the starlight gathered. After thinking for a while, he took out the beast tooth and placed it in the altar. Buzz! When the beast tooth was placed in the altar, an extremely dense starlight suddenly burst out from the altar and enveloped him. He was startled, but he did not feel any danger, so he just looked at it calmly. When the dense starlight gradually dissipated, his vision became clear again. Yun Nuoshing blinked and held Little Purple Soul in his arms, just in case. He raised his head and saw a magnificent starry sky in front of him. The boundless starry sky shone brightly. Vast galaxies appeared in front of him, and their shadows were clearly reflected in his eyes. Even though the galaxies in his sight were so close, they were actually very far away from each other. They might collide in the future, but that would be a matter of billions of years. The lifespan of a mortal is just a spark. No one can see such a vast scene. Yun Nuoshing murmured softly. He suddenly remembered that he had once said that it was because mortals could not see the stars that he wanted to reach the peak to see the most brilliant colors of the starry sky. However, on his way to the peak, he saw this magnificent scene. It was incomparably beautiful and dazzling. He could not stay for too long because he had a reason not to stay. He had to leave eventually, so he decided not to stay for even a moment. It was only when he stood at the peak that he had the time to look at the scenery that he had forgotten along the way. How long had he forgotten about it? He was not sure. Perhaps it was as long as an era or even longer. In short, it was a very long time. After that, he had been immersed in it, but he could no longer find the feelings he once had when he was looking at the starry sky. The starry sky in his eyes was incomparably distant and unreachable. It was only later that he realized that the starry sky was extremely fragile. It was not much tougher than a mortal's and could be destroyed with one hand. In the end, everything had changed. In fact, nothing had changed in this world. The only thing that had changed was him, who had been hurriedly swept away by the tide of time. Brother, brother. It was not until Little Purple Soul pulled on his hair that he came back to his senses. His misty eyes became clear again. He gently closed his eyes and took a deep breath. After a moment, he opened them again. His beautiful eyes were suffused with a substantial and colorful light. Yun Nuoshing smiled. He stretched out his hand and tousled the little girl's hair. His gaze turned to the front. 10 feet in front of him was the place where all the astral light in this starry space gathered. Incomparably resplendent, eternal astral light, the ultimate secret of this ancient temple, was hidden there. Yun Nuoshing reached out and peeled away the layers of starlight. His palm touched something and he was stunned for a moment. The texture seemed to be paper, and the shape seemed to be something like a scroll. He grabbed it without thinking and gently pulled it out. He lowered his head to take a look. As expected, it was a scroll with words written on it. Oh, the words don't make sense. Book of Epochs. Yun Nuoshing scratched his head and took out the Book of Epoch. He placed the scroll under the Book of Epochs and shook it. 3 words appeared in his mind. Origin of the Star Technique. Origin of the Star Technique. Yun Nuoshing murmured and narrowed his eyes. Since the words were recorded in the Book of Epochs, he should have been to that world. He just didn't know which world it was. He didn't know if it was the world where the 3,000 star ruins were. But after a moment, he threw these random thoughts aside. It was useless even if he knew which world it was. That ancient life had left the final clue in the realm of the gods, right where Yun Nuoshing was. There was no need to search for the source, unless that old urchin really liked to stir up trouble. He opened the scroll and read it using the Book of Epoch. He skimmed through 10 lines at a glance. In less than a minute, he finished reading the scroll. After muttering to himself for a while, he rolled it up and patted it on his hand. He muttered to himself, "It's a complete study of the power of the stars. It's really thorough. It's much better than Star Reflector, and my understanding, as expected of you." He had a very complicated feeling towards this life form that could turn the realm of the gods upside down with just a will. It seemed to be an expert above the heavenly god level, so he had some respect for it and some curiosity. But since this fellow had messed up the realm of the gods and he had to clean up the mess in the end, he couldn't help but want to beat this fellow up and scold him. Although he might not be able to say anything if he were to really scold him, anyway, that was what he meant. It can be considered divine grade, around the heavenly god level. Yun Nuoshing patted the scroll and put it away. It would be a waste if he didn't keep it. He could also study matters related to the power of the stars. After all, he seemed to have taken a more unique path in this life. He reckoned that he would evolve the power of the stars when he reached the divine grade and combine it with divine energy to form a higher level of energy. Throughout history, there had been many gods who had done this. As for the final result, he wasn't sure if it would be more powerful and purer than divine energy or even worse. The new energy born from combining another type of energy with divine energy might not necessarily be stronger than divine energy. After all, the latter was an energy that surpassed the world's origin energy. Well, he would talk about this later. So, how do we get out of here? Looking at the sea of stars, Yun Nuoshing scratched his cheeks. This starry sky was indeed very beautiful, but just like what he had chosen before, he had other things to do now, and he didn't have the time to look at the sea of stars in a daze. That kind of thing could be done when he was busy or when he reached the peak again. He would do it when he was free. Previously, he had also soaked in the sea of stars for decades without moving. Just as he was thinking about how to get out, a suction force pulled them up. Little Purple Soul cried out in surprise and quickly hugged his neck. In the blink of an eye, Yun Nuoshing and the others arrived outside. It was the cave outside. In front of them was a forest, and the cave behind them collapsed with a loud bang as they came out. The entrance of the cave was blocked by a huge rock, and the ground began to tremble quietly. In the end, the mountain range sank to the bottom of the ground with a rumble, and was buried by the surrounding huge rocks. It was as if there was an additional rocky beach in the original place. It's destroyed just like that? Yun Nuoshing looked at the rocky beach, and was a little dazed. They were just walking inside a moment ago, but because they took away the astral origin technique, the cave and half of the mountain range sank. Little Beast chattered for a while, and Yun Nuoshing was a little enlightened. This place had always been guarded by the Beast King, which was the demigod magical beast. Although the leader would change, the responsibility had never changed. Every Beast King wanted to open the cave, but they had never succeeded. Moreover, the magical beasts here had no lifespan limit. When the time was up, the Beast King would go to a new place and choose another demigod magical beast to guard the place. That magical beast would then become the new Beast King and advance to the demigod magical beast. Therefore, many magical beasts looked forward to the day when they could venture into the depths of the cave and see what was there. Yun Nuoshing thought for a while. This was the case of the younger generation waiting for their senior to die. Looking forward to it, who knows how many years, who knows how many generations had passed, and then Yun Nuoshing had taken advantage of it. Probably that place was not for magical beasts to enter, but for people to guard it. Little Beast thought for a while and felt that it made sense. Buddha said, "Let's leave it to fate." Yun Nuoshing scratched his head. Was that guy also waiting for someone to come and take away the astral origin technique? As for who it was, it didn't matter as long as it was handed over to another person? He scratched his head. He felt that this guess was quite reasonable, but he just couldn't find the meaning of doing so. Maybe he would understand it in the final destination. Then, he would think about it again at that time. After thinking for a while, Yun Nuoshing still felt that something was not right. He felt that he should study Buddhism. Maybe he could understand something. Forget it, I don't have time for that. However, he shook his head as soon as this thought appeared in his mind. The waters of Buddhism were very deep. He was too lazy to get involved. He still had so many things to deal with. After putting Little Beast on the ground, Yun Nuoshing smiled and waved at it. He hugged Little Purple Soul tightly and ran away. He had been out for a while. He should go back and see how the girls were doing. Little Beast rolled its black eyes. A bright white figure suddenly appeared beside it. The figure looked at Yun Nuoshing in the distance, then looked at the collapsed mountain range. Finally, it closed its eyes and disappeared. Little Beast roared at the disappearing figure, then ran towards the forest. A gust of wind came from the place where it was standing. It blew away the faint sound of Buddhas chanting into the distance. Chapter 1004. Above the purple-gold lava lake, Yun Nuoshing sat cross-legged in midair. Below him, four huge whirlpools emerged from the lava lake. Those were the signs of Little Moon and the others cultivating. Not far away there was a petite figure with a white ball above her head, swimming around the lava lake. That little girl was naturally Little Purple Soul. This girl was fearless. Fortunately, nothing seemed to be able to hurt her. Only then did Yun Nuoshing relax a little. He did not have to worry that something would happen to this girl if he did not see her for a while. Oh, it's been 3 days. Looks like I still need some time. Looking down at Little Moon and the others, the momentum of their cultivation was just right and there was no sign of it slowing down. It looked like they had made a lot of mistakes in their cultivation so far. It would take some time for them to replenish their transcendental energy. With a wave of his hand, Yun Nuoshing took out the astral origin technique. He patted it on his hand and a moment later, he placed it on his forehead. He still needed some time, so he could not waste it. He did not have to worry about Little Purple Soul. This place had been sealed by him, so no one could come in and join in the fun. Mystic arts from a different world. Oh, this seems to be called astral arts. A large amount of information surged into his mind. Yun Nuoshing kept analyzing the information while tapping his fingers. This was not the first time he tried to cultivate a cultivation technique from a different world. However, every time he tried, he had to analyze it himself. This was because the cultivation systems were not compatible. The cultivation techniques from other worlds were derived from the laws of that world, while his cultivation was based on the laws of heaven and earth in the realm of the god. There would be some differences between the two worlds. If he wanted to cultivate a cultivation technique from another world, he would have to find a way to resolve the differences between the cultivation systems. This was not the first time Yun Nuoshing had done something like this. Even if it was left behind by a powerhouse above the heavenly god level, the basic laws at the bottom would not change. As long as he found the clues, he would be able to quickly learn how to cultivate it. I've got it. As soon as he finished sorting out the information, Yun Nuoshing raised his eyebrows and smiled. He had touched the bottom laws. The door to cultivating the astral origin technique was open to him. This step seemed very simple for him because he was once a heavenly god. His control over everything was much stronger than others. The difference was like the difference between the lower realms of the third realm and the upper realms of the 8 realms. It was not the same concept. Yun Nuoshing and he had done something similar before. So it might seem simple, but for a god like him, it would take at least a few decades. The people in that world all cultivate astral energy. The so-called astral origin technique was born from this. It's a world that specializes in cultivating astral energy. However, the astral energy in that world doesn't seem as pure as the one in the realm of the god. Yun Nuoshing tilted his head. The realm of the gods was an extremely special existence. It was so special that once it entered another world, that world would undergo earth-shaking changes because of its arrival. This was determined by the extremely strong karma and law of the realm of the gods. Its level of existence was above almost everything in the world. In front of the realm of the gods, all existences would have a lower priority. Of course, the celestial gods were originally outside of the law, so they had to be excluded. All worlds would change because of the arrival of the realm of the god. For example, the world where the realm of the gods resided had undergone fundamental changes because of its existence. The laws of this world were incomparably powerful. The astral energy in this world was like the difference between the sun and gravel when compared to other worlds. These were all changes brought about by the realm of the god. It was not called the first major world in the 8 realms for nothing. It was just a huge flat continent, but it was called a realm or a world for a reason. But this guy is quite amazing. With his own strength, he studied the astral energy all his life. He used the astral energy to an unfathomable level. It's so miraculous that he almost took the astral energy out of the energy system and made it the 4th factor. Even Yun Nuoshing couldn't help but be surprised when she read the last part. There were 3 primary factors in a world: energy, laws, and order. All kinds of energy, be it immortal chi or demonic chi, spatial energy, or time energy, would eventually be classified as energy. The astral energy was no exception. However, that ancient life had almost tampered with the primary factor of the world where it resided. He almost made the astral energy become independent and become the 4th factor in the world's planning. It could only be said that this person was terrifyingly powerful. Well, it's just wishful thinking. There have been countless divine realm experts in history, and naturally there are many experts above the divine realm. They didn't do that and didn't arbitrarily change the primary factor. There must be a reason for that. Yun Nuoshing smacked her lips. Tampering with the primary factor was simply shaking the essence of the world and tampering with the foundation of the Deyuan realm. Many people in history should have thought of doing something like this, and she was one of them. Of course, in the end, no one really put it into action like this guy because it was too dangerous. If something went wrong, it would cause the Deyuan realm to be in turmoil. No one knew what would happen then. There seemed to be a part of the ancient life's records in the origin astral technique, and it also mentioned this matter. Fortunately, it had sensed something taboo in the end and urgently stopped this suicidal act. Later on, it talked about many things, including its many views and research on this world. Generally speaking, it was similar to Yun Nuoxing's understanding. There were some differences, but they were mostly the same. After all, when one studied the world from different perspectives, the results would naturally be different. Yun Nuoxing sorted out the information in her mind, and suddenly caught something that was not quite the same. She could not help but frown. The first major world was created by the primordial god, and it contained a part of the primordial god's own divine power. It was blessed by the heavens and defied the heavens. It was as if the primordial god had personally descended, and all the worlds that it passed by would be bestowed with grace. The gap between my world and it was difficult to measure, so I had no choice but to choose to go to the first major world to continue my path. The study of the primordial divine power was very difficult. It was scattered and dissolved in every inch of the world, and not a single drop could be captured. I could see it drifting out of the first major world with my own eyes, but I could not touch it at all. Unfortunately, this study had to be stopped prematurely. I'm still looking for the path after the first star. The first major world seems to be called the world after God. 12 eras have passed in this world, and it's very difficult. The world I'm in is not at the center of the void, but only at the edge of the realm of heaven. The conditions there are much worse. I've studied the realm of earth and the lower realm for many years, but I still can't figure out the law of the energy flow in the void, and I can't tell what divides the three realms. The void is boundless, and the three realms also grow without limit along with the known range, as if there's no end to it. This is a very strange phenomenon. With the power of the first star, it's enough to analyze the existence of the 8 realms. The Great Yuan realm is divided into 8. The 7 realms can clearly find the traces of the primordial element of the 8 realms flowing through the lower realms. If the people of the 7 realms can find this special trace, they can follow this river and come to the 8 realms. It's the same for other people in the lower realms. I've analyzed the existence of the 8 realms, but I couldn't find the source above it. The source of everything is the 8 realms itself, and there's no higher primordial realm. It's also impossible to break through the first star realm by searching for a higher existence. This stage is so sacred that it doesn't allow the slightest bit of crooked methods. In the end, you can only rely on yourself to take that step. It's been 14 eras, and it's now the 65th era in the Great Yuan Realm's calendar. The void reboot 5 eras ago left me with a hidden disease. In theory, the first star realm is definitely not affected by the void reboot, but it seems like it's just wishful thinking. Only by going to the first Great Yuan realm can one truly avoid the enormous power of the void reboot. That power is even more terrifying than all the karma and laws of order. I can feel the scent of the primordial divine power. Perhaps the void reboot is a time ritual left behind by the primordial god. This primordial realm needs this process. The Great Yuan realm that is moving forward without any restrictions needs an emergency switch to stop the self-destructive world at the critical moment. It's been a very long time since the 67th era in the Great Yuan realm's calendar. I've been to many places in the Great Yuan realm, but I still can't find the path beyond the first star realm. During this period, I've failed 100,000 times, and each time, I've used hundreds of millions of years. I can't see any hope. This step is too difficult. It's not a natural moat, but an abyss of despair. Of all the first star realm experts and countless celestial god experts in the first great Yuan realm, only 1 in 100 million can squeeze into that rank. Have I overestimated myself? In the 68th era in the great Yuan realm's calendar, I can feel that the end of my life is near. A first star realm expert should have an unlimited lifespan, but the power of the void reboot has been interfering with me, disrupting my star position. From this era onwards, my body has been deteriorating, and it's at this moment of despair that I mysteriously broke through. When Yun Nuoxing saw this, she was completely stunned. Her head trembled, and she nearly fainted. What did she mean by mysteriously breaking through? After working hard for 17 eras, she still couldn't see any signs of hope. Then, when she was on the brink of death, she suddenly broke through? Ascended above celestial God? F*CKU. I did not feel any external force. It was completely different from what I had imagined, a breakthrough caused by the primordial divine power. I did not detect any mistakes in my body, nor did I discover any changes in my body. I could only feel that the power in my hands was on a completely different level. The gap of 1 step was enough to make one despair. I could only feel that I had leaped into a completely different realm. This feeling had not been felt for 17 eras. That's right, it was so powerful that it fascinated me. It was as though I could grasp the void in my hands. I don't know what this realm is called, but in my world, no one had ever reached beyond the initial star stage. Let's just call it that for the time being. After 17 eras of hard work, I've somehow achieved my goal. I'm a bit uneasy because this power came too mysteriously. It's too strange. I'm worried that this power will disappear one day. It's funny to say that there are times when I'm afraid even at this realm. I haven't felt this kind of emotion for many years. Even when I'm facing the void reset, I didn't feel afraid. But at this juncture, I'm worried about this unknown power. Since I've obtained this power out of nowhere, I must be prepared that this power may disappear at any time. I can feel that my remaining lifespan seems to have lengthened a little, but I still haven't fully recovered. The injuries caused by void reset can't be healed. I should have less than half an era of lifespan left. This makes me very uncomfortable. It's rare for me to reach this level, but I'm being declared dead before I even get to see all the mysteries of this level. I have to finish everything before my time is up. I also have to leave some meager records so that people who come later can see them. At least this life won't be in vain. It's the end of the 68th era in the Yuan realm calendar. It's about time. I've already prepared everything. If I don't want to become a pale name that will be remembered by others, I can only give it a try. I'm not willing to give up the fruits of my labor in this life. I want to continue it. This is the only path I can take. I hope I won't fall halfway. What's that? Is that a relic? An altar swaying in the starry sky and the void? There's not much time left. I shouldn't waste my time here. It's time to end. Wait, don't tell me that thing really exists. This doesn't make sense. 8. The information stopped abruptly here. The information that was forcefully cut off at the end made Yun Nuoxing's face turn black. She rolled up the scroll and threw the origin of the astral technique with all her might. F*CKU, you're killing me with OCD. In short, through this large pile of information, Yun Nuoxing learned a lot about the ancient life. It was a powerful being from the Dark Age. Before the end of the era, it was already a celestial god. It survived the great reincarnation with great difficulty, but unfortunately, it left behind a root of misfortune. However, the root of misfortune did not erupt all at once. It just slowly nibbled away at its life. It spent 17 eras and tried hundreds of thousands of methods to break through to the celestial god level. However, when it was about to die, it inexplicably made a breakthrough and forcibly extended its life. With the power of the celestial god level, it endured for another half an era. When it was about to reach the end of its life, it was unwilling to die just like that. So it thought of a way to pave the way for its future and prepared everything. It entered the reincarnation cycle alone, hoping that one day it could start all over again. When it was about to enter the reincarnation cycle, it saw something that scared it so much that it almost sat up from its coffin. However, before it could see clearly, it entered the reincarnation cycle, and this life ended. As for whether the ancient life had returned from the reincarnation cycle, Yun Nuoshing felt that he had returned and had chosen the realm of the gods as the location for his next life. If one had to ask why, it was because the traces in the cave and on the stone walls were not from the same time period as the rundown ancient temple. The time around the rundown ancient temple had completely stopped, and one could not feel the passage of time. The aura of time could not affect the ancient temple. However, the traces on the cave walls were left behind by time. He felt that the traces on the stone walls should have been left behind by himself after his return. As for why, he was not sure. He just felt that way. He had no idea why or what he wanted to do. In the end, it was just a guess. He just had to wait for the ancient life to jump out and verify his guess. Wasn't I going to cultivate? Yun Nuoshing suddenly raised his eyebrows. For some reason, he felt that he had been led astray by his own thoughts. He was not planning to cultivate the origin astral technique. He suddenly saw the information recorded in the scroll and read it with interest. Then, his thoughts were led astray. After flipping through the origin astral technique scroll, Yun Nuoshing angrily lay down on his back. He felt that he had seen something that he was very concerned about, and he was not in the mood to cultivate. After 17 eras, even the experts above the heavenly god realm don't know how they broke through. Scratching his head, Yun Nuoshing felt that his mind was as messy as a hemp rope. However, after a moment, he returned to calmness and sighed, "If possible, I really want to see it. Even it doesn't know the breakthrough process. Maybe I can find some clues from it." The power of the first generation of great heavenly gods. To be honest, it's not that I haven't thought about it. However, it's more or less unreliable. Who knows where the first generation of heavenly gods died? They left behind an empty world, and they all died in the twilight of the gods. This name is also very common. He sighed helplessly and sat up. These 5 words were very common. In the eyes of mortals, the death of a group of elementary gods could be considered the twilight of the gods. Then, did the first generation of great heavenly gods all die in battle? He was not too sure. He felt that at least the supreme god of destruction should have survived. In the cycle of reincarnation, she was waiting. What was she waiting for? He was not sure. Was she waiting for something? He was also not sure. In the end, what realm was she at? Above the heavenly god realm, that was for sure. How many realms were there above the heavenly god realm? In the past, he thought that the heavenly god realm was the end. Only when he stood there did he realize that there were higher realms, but he could never reach them. A group of powerful heavenly gods spent their entire lives trying to pass down generations of painstaking efforts in order to reach a realm that they did not know, did not understand, and could not understand. However, they could not find the path. That ancient life form was not the first person to cross over in confusion. As far as he knew, there should be more, and there should be more that had not been recorded. However, what was the reason? He reckoned that no one could answer this question. Lu Li. Suddenly, he muttered the name. He felt a little nostalgic. He did not know if she should be doing well now. He was very curious. He did not know if she had become a heavenly god, and whether the plan back then had succeeded. He really wanted to know. He wanted to explore the path after that through her. He felt that, if it was her, she should be able to do it. This thought made him laugh bitterly. The former heavenly god of primal chaos finally could not help but ask for help from others. Gods, heavenly gods, how laughable! He stood alone on the highest peak of the tower, but still wanted to reach higher. However, there was nothing that he could touch within his reach. He had no other choice but to stand on the top of the tower, stand on his tiptoes, and reach out his hand, hoping to reach higher places. However, when he looked around, he saw a group of dazed people standing alone, looking at each other from afar. Unwilling to give up, they continued to place things on the top of the tower, making the tower taller than usual. They forced themselves to be taller, and the steeple became on the verge of collapse. Layers of stones were placed on the already unstable top of the tower, and in the end, only a straight line was left on the top of the tower. It became abnormally dangerous at the top, and the slightest movement could cause the steeple to shake. At the beginning, they might be able to persevere until they could no longer bear all of this. At this time, the slightest bit of carelessness would cause them to fall down together with the steeple. Below them was the endless abyss that they had created. If they fell down, they would be smashed to pieces, and might not even be able to reach the ground again. In the end, they were unable to reach the higher level. He fell down, but he did not fall straight down. Instead, he hung on to the top of the tower, wanting to climb up again. However, when he looked at the incomparably sharp top of the tower, he felt at a loss. Looking at the endless top, he was even more at a loss. Thus, he could not help but want to reach out and ask for help from others. Perhaps this was also the reason why he had them follow him all this time. He wanted to make the top of the tower less dangerous. Chapter 1005. Starlight descended from the sky and landed on the lake that was filled with purple-gold magma. Thousands of strands of starlight turned into a magnificent pillar of starlight. Black energy decorated the real stars. Above the magma lake, Yun Nuoshing sat cross-legged in the center of the pillar of starlight. Thousands of thumb-sized stars appeared around him. Those were all condensed from the power of the stars. After cultivating for a period of time, Yun Nuoshing opened his eyes. The stars that shrouded his body fluctuated slightly and revolved around him at an extremely fast speed. It was as if he was the center of the star field. He opened his eyes and looked down. One of the 4 vortexes had quietly disappeared, but the person inside it had no intention of coming out. It seemed that he was still cultivating. His aura was gradually increasing. Yun Nuoshing raised his head and looked at the sky outside the volcano. He sighed softly. It's been almost 10 days. It's been almost 10 days since I entered the divine miracle. Isn't it a little too long? Yun Nuoshing rubbed his hair and sighed again. This had almost become a habit. He slowly stood up and stretched. With a thought, the thousands of stars that surrounded him retracted back into his body. He pinched his wrist and squeezed his palm hard. He muttered to himself, "This origin astral technique is not bad. It dissects the power of the stars very thoroughly. Beginners probably won't be able to cultivate it. Oh, that's nonsense. It's a fool to come into contact with something above the divine grade when they're new to a different field." The last comet that did not have time to be absorbed into his body lost its power and quickly brushed past Yun Nuoshing, dragging a starlight tail and disappearing into the horizon at a speed that was many times faster than the speed of sound. Yun Nuoshing. That thing can fly out? After moving a little, he descended to the surface of the magma lake. He reached his hand into the magma lake and groped around. Then, he grabbed the back of the person's collar and lifted her up. He wasn't worried that their cultivation would be disturbed. Basically, such a thing wouldn't happen. He knocked Yu-Er's little head with a moderate amount of force. The little girl's entire body abruptly shook as she woke up. She discovered that Yun Nuoshing had lifted her up in the air like a little chick. She immediately shook her legs in a panic and said with an innocent face, "Big brother Yun, what are you doing?" Ignoring her act of acting cute, Yun Nuoshing's forehead darkened. With a face full of smiles, he said kindly, "I remember I told you guys not to advance. Could it be that it all came out from your right ear? That kind gaze made Yu-Er's little body tremble. She curled into a ball in the air and lowered her head. She didn't say anything. She did feel that there were signs of advancement just now. In her excitement, she followed the momentum and forgot what he said. After all, she was advancing to the beginner god level. Once she crossed over, she would be in two completely different realms. One was in the sky and the other was on the ground. They were two completely different realms. If she didn't reach the beginner god level, she would always be a nobody. Oh, because this idea has been deeply rooted in your mind, when the momentum appeared, you couldn't help but want to break through, right? After listening to Yu-Er's muttering, Yun Nuoshing smiled even more kindly. His darkened face made Yu-Er's body tremble like a sieve. Mei Mao's eyes were watery. Yun Nuoshing pursed his lips. He carried her like this and turned his head to look at the other three. He chuckled and said, "How much longer can you hold it in?" Splash! As soon as he laughed, 3 little heads popped up from the surface of the lake. They looked at him with embarrassment. Little Moon even buried half of her little face in the lava and blew lava bubbles. Her little face was frowning slightly, and her moon-like eyes were sparkling. It had to be said that this pitiful look could arouse other men's desire to protect her. Only Yun Nuoshing was used to this, so he just put on a fake smile and said, "Get up." The 2 simple words made Little Moon and Chu Xianling emerge from the lava. They hurriedly looked at Yu-Er, who was being carried in the air like a little chick. Then, they looked straight ahead and put on a serious expression, pretending that they didn't see anything. When Yu-Er saw that the 3 of them were ignoring her, she pouted angrily. She couldn't help but say in her soul, "You're not saving me. Ingrates. What happened to facing it together? It's all fake." The corner of Little Moon's mouth twitched. She really wanted to say that she deserved it. She was the one who suggested that she wanted to advance without her brother's knowledge. She thought that her brother wouldn't notice them when he was cultivating, and by the time they successfully advanced, it would be too late. Even her brother wouldn't be able to say anything. Yes, that was what that idiot originally planned, but she voted against it. After all, her brother said that they couldn't advance, although she couldn't hold it in herself. This was the reason why she didn't refute that noisy girl now. Yun Nuoshing glanced at the 4 people, whose eyes were filled with lightning, and sighed in annoyance. She said, "Stand there and don't move." Then, she carried Yu-Er to the side. When Little Moon and the other 2 saw this, they were filled with malicious guesses. This little girl couldn't escape this time. They could tell from her expression when she was carried away. It was an understatement to say that she was going to die generously. She looked like she was going to die heroically. Carrying Yu-Er to the side, he condensed a piece of ice on the surface of the lava lake and stood on it. Only then did he put the little girl down. Yun Nuoshing looked at her with a solemn expression. His gaze was sizing up this little girl from head to toe, causing her hair to stand on end. She kept feeling that this gaze was like a god sizing up a piece of fat meat, thinking about where to cut. 5 minutes later, Yun Nuoshing nodded. Her voice was extremely solemn. "Strip." Yu-Er blushed. "Ah! Show your stomach." Yun Nuoshing was expressionless. Without waiting for the little girl to react, she began to make hand seals. The next seal is to prevent you from accidentally squeezing into the beginner god level. When she said the word accidentally, she sounded like she was gnashing her teeth. Yu-Er shuddered when she heard it. When she thought of Yun Nuoshing's angry face, her mind went blank. She didn't even think about it and pulled up her top. Her jade-like skin was instantly exposed to the air. Yun Nuoshing was still expressionless. She changed her hand seals, and all the energy in her palm condensed on her index finger. She poked Yu-Er's lower abdomen. Her hand moved like a dragon and snake, and in a short moment, she drew a red talisman. Then, she poked a second stroke without stopping. This time, she drew an orange talisman, followed by a yellow one. Every talisman looked very mysterious. In any case, Yu admitted that she couldn't understand a single stroke. Those few talismans were stacked together, and every talisman of different colors must have a stroke that intersected with the centermost point. Buzz. When the last purple talisman landed, the few talismans that were stacked together trembled slightly. With a soft buzzing sound, all the colors faded away and merged into the centermost point. The talismans turned black. However, in just a short moment, those colors surged out from the centermost point. What appeared once again was a rainbow color that filled 7 talismans. It rapidly spread to the rest of the body, as if the talismans were blooming. The colors at the corners stopped after spreading for 3 inches. Then, they slowly shrank and automatically condensed into a huge mysterious talisman. Yun Nuoxing bent her finger and gently pointed. That talisman sank into Yu-Er's body, wrapping the energy carrier in her lower abdomen impeccably like a sealed seal. It's done. Yun Nuoxing heaved a sigh of relief. Yu-Er obediently put down her clothes. Her beautiful face was slightly red, but this couldn't stop her curiosity. Brother Yun, what is that? 7 trillion seal. Yun Nuoxing stretched out her thumb and pointed in the direction where Little Moon and the others were. During this period of time, the energy that you have cultivated will be completely accumulated in the seal. When the seal is released, it will be poured out in one go. However, this is only the small 7 trillion seal, so the effect is limited. The large 7 trillion seal will suppress your current realm and accumulate energy to cultivate again. When you reach a certain level, the accumulated energy will be released 7 times to help you break through to a higher level. However, this is a one-time release. Yes, there won't be as many as 7 times, just one time, so it won't suppress your realm. Alright, call Yu-Er over. Yu-Er blinked and nodded. Then, she skipped over. She was glad that she was wearing a dress today. If it was a dress, she would have to take it off completely. Next, Little Moon, Chu Xianling, and Chu Chun didn't have any problems either. Yun Nuoxing did the same thing and created the small 7 trillion seal. This allowed them to continue cultivating for the time being, and they didn't have to directly advance to the beginner god level. However, it was a little awkward when she was drawing the seal. Little Moon was wearing a white robe, and her belt was almost half undone. However, Yun Nuoxing didn't feel anything. Chu Xianling was also a little embarrassed. However, these two were still fine. He knew that his eyes wouldn't look around randomly, and his heart was as calm as still water. Look at him, he was already over 70 trillion years old. With his condition, he could have been awarded a sage award long ago. Little girl or whatever, he wasn't a person who was infatuated with lust. However, Chu Chen, didn't I ask you to take it all off? Looking at Chu Chen, who flung his clothes and took off everything in a second, Yun Nuoxing was so angry that he almost kicked him into the magma. When they returned, Chu Xianling saw that his younger brother's face was bruised and swollen. He couldn't help but ask with concern, "What happened to you?" Chu Chen grinned and laughed bitterly. "No, it's just that it stings Big Brother Yun's eyes." Chu Xianling and the other 2 girls were confused. The small 7 trillion seal doesn't hinder your cultivation. How much you cultivate now is just accumulating energy. It's just like how I advanced from the 2nd seal of the demon level to the 9th refinement stage of the demigod level in one go. It's the same principle. It only prevents excessive energy from being stored in the energy carrier and prevents you from advancing. Yun Nuoxing was expressionless, but a vein popped out on her forehead. You've already cultivated for 7 days. You didn't sleep or rest for 7 days. As Yun Nuoxing spoke, he brought the few of them to a place near the volcano wall. On the mountain wall close to the lava lake, there was a mark about 3 inches above the surface of the lake. He pointed at the mark and said, "This is the result of 7 days of hard work by the 4 of you. If it wasn't for the size of the lake." Little Moon and the other 3 girls looked embarrassed. They didn't expect to use up so much transcendental energy. This meant that they had a lot of flaws in their bodies. It wasn't as simple as just one or two flaws. Little Purple Soul ran over from afar. She stepped on the surface of the lava lake and jumped into Yun Nuoxing's arms. She rubbed against him comfortably and climbed onto his shoulder. Little Magic jumped down from the little girl's head. He stepped on Little Moon and the others' heads and jumped around. After 2 rounds, he returned to Yun Nuoxing's head and called out to them, "Woo woo." They looked at the white ball of meat speechlessly. Was this a new way of greeting? Many things have happened in the divine miracle in the past 7 days. However, it doesn't have much to do with us. The celestial luck is also full. Unfortunately, it's all gold. There's not a single black one, let alone those mixed colors. Yun Nuoxing shrugged and sighed. Is the divine miracle not over yet? You were hung on Yun Nuoxing's body listlessly and rambled. I don't like this place. It's annoying. It feels dead. It doesn't have the liveliness of the realm of the gods. After all, this is not a complete space. Many of the laws are not complete. It's an incomplete land that evolved on its own. Yun Nuoxing also felt a little helpless. He was used to these things. He had also been to places with even more fragmented laws. Or rather, those fragmented lands were more common. Places like the myriad god realm, where all the laws and order were perfect and complete, were the rarest treasures. A small world without anyone taking care of it, without the existence of a small world core, would become a dilapidated land in less than 1,000 years. There were many places with chaotic laws everywhere in the starry sky. Little Moon stretched her body. Just as she was about to sit down and rest, the pale pink light on her palm suddenly became very bright. She could not help but let out a cry of surprise. Buzz. The same thing happened to Yun Nuoxing and the others. Seeing this, Yun Nuoxing understood. Looks like it's the final moment. Little Purple Soul, come back to my soul. I don't know if the so-called final destination can bring others in, but it should be fine as long as you're in my soul. Yes, Little Purple Soul replied with a drawn-out voice. She smacked her lips on his face, and then went into his soul with a smile. Not only them, but all the people in the Holy Spirit miracle who had pale pink light on their palms had also noticed this scene. The light on their palms became incomparably bright. For a moment everyone stood up. They had the information and knew what was going on. Their eyes flashed with anticipation, and some of them were eager to try. However, some people just sighed. They didn't seem to be very interested. It seemed that they didn't have much hope. After all, every time the Holy Spirit miracle opened, the highlight was always the same, which was the final destination. However, they were always disappointed. Naturally, they didn't feel that there was much hope after hearing so much about it. Buzz. Beams of starlight fell from the sky and enveloped all the people with pale pink light on their palms. Everyone slowly floated up. No matter where they were surrounded by the light. Those who were still being chased stopped because of the sudden appearance of the beams of light. Seeing this, the people who were chasing after them excitedly rushed forward. However, they were repelled by the beams of light. Seeing this, the people inside the beams of light heaved a sigh of relief. It was really a blessing in disguise. They were chased because of the qualification to enter the divine miracle. In the end, they were saved because of the qualification to enter the divine miracle. Sigh. Those who did not get the qualification stopped and sighed when they saw the beams of starlight descending. However, they did not seem to be disappointed. Anyway, according to the rumors, they could not enter the final destination. Even if they went in, they might not get anything. Thinking of this, they felt much better. I wonder if the final destination can be open this time. It's hard to say. Once, it was said that 20 young supreme experts and 300 young experts were gathered together, but they still failed to break the barrier. You can imagine how difficult it was. Moreover, there were 50 divine emperors among the 300 experts. Well, that has nothing to do with us. While there is still some time before they go in, let's hurry up and collect the star's fate. Brother, are you trying to make a last-minute effort? Shut up. Yun Nuashing narrowed his eyes and took a deep breath. He raised his head and looked at the beams of starlight. His calm heart actually felt a little nervous at this moment. He could not help but smile bitterly. He had not felt this way for many years, not counting the time when he had not recovered his memory. Little Moon walked to his side and held his hand. She tilted her head and looked at his beautiful face. She found a trace of undetectable anticipation and nervousness. She could not help but smile. Brother, are you nervous? Yun Nuashing closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and exhaled heavily. After trying a few times, he still couldn't calm himself down. He smiled helplessly, a little. The source of the turmoil in the middle of the far ancient era, the source of the 16 trillion years of war. Everything is because of this. The things that happened are still vivid in my mind. Now, I want to see the glory of the source of the turmoil. The entire far ancient era has been fighting for so many years. In the end, only I know about it. How can I not be excited? Yun Nuashing grinned. Whoosh! The pink light in his hand became denser and denser. The hundreds of figures that were enveloped by it rose into the air. When the pillar of light was at its brightest, there was a flash, and the people and the pillar of starlight disappeared. The other young experts who watched these people leave all took a deep breath, and could not help but grin. The show is about to begin. In the brilliant and eternal star region, there was an endless stretch of palaces that stretched for hundreds of thousands of feet. It was incomparably grand. Starlight shone over the entire stretch of palaces and cast a beautiful light on the walls of the palaces. It was as if they were made from perfect gems and were as magnificent as the most precious treasures in the world. Moreover, the stretch of palaces did not have a single style. Even those who did not understand could tell with a single glance. Although the palaces changed styles in the same area, it did not seem abrupt. It also seemed like a colossus that had been built several times. This stretch of palaces silently stood in the starry sky, perfectly blending into the background of the starry sky. There was no pressure coming from it. It just floated quietly in the starry sky like a creeping beast that was in a long period of slumber. Outside the body of this colossal beast, there was a huge transparent barrier. It was still flickering with starlight. The stars that had condensed were the size of washbasins and slowly revolved around the starlight barrier. There was a platform at an unknown distance in front of the stretch of palaces. Although it was quite far away, it was obvious that the two were one. The platform was directly facing the entrance of the stretch of palaces. At this moment, starlight suddenly descended from the platform that was tens of thousands of feet wide. Pink balls of light descended from the starlight. After a slight pause, figures slowly walked out of the pink balls of light. Their auras seemed extremely vast and mighty. Some of them still had lingering battle intent, which made their auras even denser. The people who walked out of the balls of light first looked at each other before looking forward at the same time. Even though there was a distance between them, the stretch of palaces was just too eye-catching. It was impossible for them not to notice it. When they saw the magnificent stretch of palaces, cries of surprise rang out from the crowd. Yun Nuashing's expression trembled slightly. An extremely complicated light suddenly flashed through his eyes. There was also some reminiscence and longing. He had only seen this stretch of palaces once. He couldn't say that he was very familiar with it. However, it didn't matter. After all, he just remembered some things because of this stretch of palaces. The past was still vivid in his mind. It was impossible for him to forget those people, those things, and this stretch of palaces, little star. The affectionate call that came from their souls caused little Yu Yang and the others to hurriedly turn their heads. They saw Ziyan and Ming Ming jogging over from a short distance away. The few little girls also smiled sweetly and hurriedly waved their hands at them. Yun Nuoshing was still lost in thought as he looked at the stretch of palaces. It wasn't until Ming and Xian ran to his side and waved in front of his eyes that he came back to his senses. Seeing the two of them staring at him coquettishly, he couldn't help but smile. "Oh, you're back. It seems that you're in good shape. Unlike you, who lost your soul all of a sudden." Chu Yingzhan put one hand on her waist and patted his shoulder grumpily. She sized up Chu Xianling and Xian and said, "Not bad. You've taken good care of these two followers." Chu Xianling and Chu Chen were speechless. How could she call them followers? Although they were the ones who said that they wanted to follow Yun Nuoshing in the beginning. "Boss, there's a surprise." Nightmare laughed sinisterly. His laughter was very sinister, and Yun Nuoshing was confused. Yuanshi coughed softly and winked at Xian and Qin Yen as if to say, "Hurry up. There aren't many chances. Hurry up." Xian rolled his eyes and looked at Qin Yen helplessly. Then, the two of them took out the melted star stones and handed them to Yun Nuoshing. "Here, a gift for you." Yun Nuoshing narrowed his eyes and used his soul power to invade the melted star stones. When he saw the two red and black stars stuffed with the melted star stones, he couldn't help but be stunned. Then, his eyes widened, and a touch of joy burst out from his eyes. Everyone was stunned. This guy's eyes were shining, like the sun. Yun Nuoshing put away the two melted star stones and coughed dryly. He raised his head and saw Xian blinking at Mei Mao. Qin Yen looked indifferent as if she didn't care, but she looked over faintly. It seemed that she also cared about it. "Well, I'll give you two time to think about your wishes. We'll talk about it when we get back." Yun Nuoshing smiled faintly. He just said that. In fact, he didn't have much hope. He didn't expect that they would really find it. "Yeah." Nightmare and Yuanshi both cheered, causing a group of people to look over. However, the two of them glared fiercely at them. Yun Nuoshing looked at these two lunatics in confusion. Although he didn't know how they discussed and distributed the wishes, it seemed that the wishes were given to Xian and Qin Yen. Was there something else that he didn't know? Forget it, he didn't care. Anyway, he wouldn't go back on his words, but no matter how he looked at it, he felt that the two lunatics' smiles were not normal. He had a faint, ominous premonition. Chapter 1006. The prototype of the 3,000-star ruins, the 3,000-star ruins that once caused a great sensation in that distant world and shook the entire upper plane of the Eight Elements realm. It was also the beginning of many things. Yun Nuoshing looked at the star palace that stretched out for an unknown distance and sighed. This was something that he did not expect at all. After dozens of epochs, he returned to the beginning. The 3,000-star ruins was a disaster that caused the entire Eight Elements realm to be shaken and exposed the God realm to all the other world. The 16 trillion years of war was all because of the appearance of these star ruins. At this time, he came here again. It was like a reincarnation. He stood here again and looked up at the star palace with an indescribable feeling in his heart. However, he was no longer the same person as before. The people beside him were also no longer the same people. It could be said that both of them had changed their appearances. It was their first meeting after dozens of epochs. "This palace is the 3,000-star ruins, that little star you saw before?" Yuanshi could not help but ask. Yun Nuoshing nodded and sighed. "It's exactly the same. Even the layout is almost the same. However, the 3,000-star ruins did not have an energy barrier. It was simply exposed to the starry sky." Suddenly, Yun Nuoshing felt someone looking at him. He turned his head and saw Qin Yu and the others waving at him from not far away. Then, they pointed at themselves and smiled. Yun Nuoshing immediately understood what they meant and nodded with a smile. Yun Nuoshing had just sorted out his messy thoughts and was about to take a good look at the breakthrough point of the 3,000-star relics in different places when a petite figure came over from beside him. He turned his head and happened to see a young girl who had not yet reached his chest looking up at him expressionlessly. Her hand even tugged at his sleeve. The girl's appearance was quite delicate. She was not the kind of beautiful, but she was petite and cute. 2 ponytails hung behind her, hanging down to her waist. Her face was expressionless, and even her eyes were listless like those of a blind person. However, as a godly emperor, physical defects were not a problem at all. Therefore, Yun Nuoxing could tell that this cute girl was not blind, but just like a blind person. Yun Nuoxing bent down slightly. At this time, Xian and the others also saw this little girl who suddenly came over. They were all puzzled, but they did not show it. My name is Tao Chu. I am here to help you under the orders of Elder Shao and Grandmaster. The 7 guides are all godly emperors. The little girl lowered her head slightly and looked at Yun Nuoxing. Then, she glanced at the people around him and asked, "Are you all here?" "Yes, yes." Yuan Shi looked around and nodded. Yun Nuoxing saw her expressionless face and could not help but smile faintly. "I know your grandmaster must have scolded me when he sent you here." Hearing this, Tao Chu quickly shook his head. However, before he could speak, Yun Nuoxing finished the next sentence with great momentum. "You don't have to repeat it. I don't intend to listen." Tao Chu's cute little face trembled fiercely. He sighed helplessly, shook his head, and said expressionlessly, "Grandmaster just told us to follow your arrangements, until the barrier is broken." Seeing her finally show some expression, Yun Nuoxing laughed in his heart. He straightened up and looked at the energy barrier between the platform and the 3,000 star palaces. After pondering for a long time, he nodded and said, "Just do it according to your procedures. I will take a look first." "Understood." Tao Chu nodded, turned around and walked to a place where 6 other people were looking at them expectantly. They seemed to be the other 6 guides. After Tao Chu walked back, he told the other 6 about Yun Nuoxing's situation. Then, the 6 of them looked at the barrier and opened their mouths from time to time, as if they were discussing something. Yuan Shi, who had been looking around, suddenly seemed to have noticed something. He narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, "Hey, little star, we met a very strong opponent earlier. Are you interested in learning more about him?" "Not interested." Yun Nuoxing shook her head, then said, "How strong was he?" Everyone smiled bitterly. "Are you concerned or not? I fought with this fool until both sides were injured. However, my opponent was beaten down by me. It wasn't satisfying, not satisfying at all." Nightmare crossed his arms and sighed. He clenched his fists again, as if he wanted to move them to loosen his bones. At this moment, Yun Nuoxing was a little interested. With their current strength, to be able to fight to a draw with them, their opponent was clearly the type that was truly strong. Could it be that he also possesses a divine grade or above divine grade divine art? It seems so. However, the quality is not as good as ours. His cultivation level is even higher than ours. There, it's those 3. The one in the middle also knows the Celestial King battle song, and he actually played it. However, it's an incomplete version, not as complete as yours. Yuan Shi raised his chin and pointed in a direction. Hearing that the other party also knew the Celestial King battle song, Yun Nuoxing became even more interested. As soon as she turned her head, she saw Yi Wenlu and the other 2. They were quietly looking at the Palace of Stars in the distance, as if they didn't notice them. These 3. It's not surprising that they know the Celestial King battle song. Looking at the 3 of them, Yun Nuoxing was taken aback as well. He let out a bitter laugh. Back then, when they had reached the palace in the Immortal King Valley, someone had beaten them to it. Coincidentally, it was the 3 of them. To think that they would be here as well. Furthermore, they had bumped into Yuan Shi and the rest. After listening to Yun Nuoxing roughly explain a small part of the details of the Celestial King Valley that they didn't know, Yuan Shi and the others were also enlightened. Then, they couldn't help but laugh sinisterly. If they had arrived a little later, they would have been able to see Little Star unravel that part of the secret and obtain the complete version of the Celestial King battle song. Unfortunately, they had arrived too early. They couldn't help but sigh. This was fate. While the few of them were chatting, the Tau Ceti people seemed to have finished their discussion. The 7 of them slowly walked to the front of the platform they were on. When they saw the few of them walking out, some of the people who knew what was going to happen next knew what was going to happen. They couldn't help but take a deep breath. The noise gradually died down, and everyone turned their gazes. Everyone, first of all, congratulations. Those who can reach this place are all outstanding people in their respective cultivation realms. Those who have some understanding of the saint's spiritual miracle can roughly guess what is going to happen next. I won't waste your time explaining it in detail. Among the 7 people, a tall man walked out. His deep voice rang clearly in everyone's ears. Everyone held their breaths and focused, secretly gathering their strength. Many of those who could reach this place knew what was going to happen next. Only a small portion of them didn't know. We will lead the way. Although I don't dare to say that we are the strongest 7 among you, at least we have the highest cultivation realms. Next, the 7 of us will guide everyone's attack. You just need to unleash your strongest attacks and leave the rest to us. This is related to whether or not the final destination can be opened, so I hope that everyone will not hold back. At this moment, we cannot even enter the door, let alone the opportunities inside. The first thing we need to do is to work together to break this layer of barrier. As for the worries of being ambushed after exhausting our strength, you can rest assured. After the barrier is opened, we can wait for everyone to recover before we step in together. As for the rewards inside, it will all depend on one's ability. Everyone listened and pondered for a moment before nodding. On the surface, there didn't seem to be any problems. It would be best if they could enter together in their peak condition. They were just afraid that if they used all their strength to break through the barrier, it would all be for the benefit of others. Everyone, let's attack with all our strength, the man shouted. His divine emperor aura broke out from his body and swept out like a hurricane. His imposing manner rose to its peak in an instant. The others also shouted in unison. Extremely bright energy beams burst out from their bodies and quickly condensed in the air. Ha! The others also roared furiously as energy surged out from their bodies. Immediately, 7 to 8 different elements crazily surged in the air above the platform. Tao Chu and the rest looked at each other and nodded. Their hands suddenly clapped together, forming hand seals with lightning-like speed. Subsequently, the hundreds of different types of energy that had gathered in the air were drawn towards the energy that the few of them had gathered. The frightening energy cloud crazily surged. Under the precise control of the 7 of them, it began to compress. Brother, should we go and help too? Ming tilted her head and looked at Yun Nuoxing. She sensed that everyone on the platform had contributed their strength. As for whether they had really used all their strength, she wasn't sure. You can go and help. With your strength, you don't need to use all your strength. It's enough to gather 1/3 of your energy. Yun Nuoxing smiled and said, If they fail, I may need your help when I attack later. Hearing this, Ming Ming and the others nodded and released their own energy into the huge ball of energy. Boom! When the huge body was suppressed to only 1,000 feet, the absolute power that had been raised by several levels suddenly erupted in an instant. It turned into 1,000 feet huge, multicolored energy beam that shot out from the platform. Violent energy suddenly streaked across the star region and violently collided with the energy barrier. Instantly, the energy colors that erupted caused the entire star region to dim slightly. The huge energy barrier actually trembled slightly. Yun Nuoxing estimated that the terrifying attack that had gathered everyone's strength was at least between the divine realm and the king of hell. It could be seen that the quality of these hundreds of people was definitely the best of the best. Each of them was an existence that could fight against those at a higher level. No, there's not enough energy. Yun Nuoxing shook her head. Perhaps to prove her words, the moment she finished speaking, the terrifying energy burst, suddenly shrunk, and the energy beam disappeared. Everyone looked at the energy barrier immediately, but they saw that the huge barrier in the starry sky didn't change at all. It was still multicolored and there wasn't even a crack. When the man saw this, he took a deep breath and waved his hand. He took out a divine weapon and shouted, "Again! Sacrifice the divine weapon!" When everyone saw that the barrier didn't even budge under their full-strength attack, their eyes trembled. The rumors were true. This barrier needed more energy to break. Instantly, their doubts were dispelled. They took out their divine weapons and shouted. Their auras became even more turbulent. In an instant, there were drops of starlight descending in the starry sky. A strong wind blew on the platform and the space roared crazily. The elites among the hundreds of Heaven's Prides finally unleashed their most powerful attacks without any hesitation. Such a huge amount of energy gathered crazily. This time, the energy of the divine weapon was added. It was even more shocking. The power was enough to shake the galaxy. The Tau Ceti people also held mid-level divine weapons. They had a way to control the energy together, and had the assistance of the divine weapon. However, controlling such a huge amount of wild and unrestrained energy at once still made their faces pale. Their fingers that were holding onto the divine weapon also turned slightly white. Boom! The tall man was the core leader. His long hair draped over his shoulders as he controlled and condensed so much energy. It was as if he had gone mad. When the huge amount of energy condensed to a critical point, he suddenly let out a roar. The violent energy that carried the power to destroy the world crashed into the huge star barrier like a meteorite. The light that erupted from it instantly covered all the starlight. Did it work this time? Looking at the destructive storm that was spreading wildly, those people who had exhausted most of their energy and were sitting on the ground couldn't help but sit up. They looked at the place where the energy storm was sweeping with anticipation. The energy storm lasted for a full 10 minutes. The surging shock waves kept crashing into the barrier, and it gradually dimmed as the energy was depleted. After 10 minutes, all the energy dissipated. The place that was covered by the gorgeous and terrifying energy storm appeared in everyone's sight. It was an energy wall that shone brilliantly with starlight. It was very beautiful, and everyone felt despair when they saw it. This thing really isn't that easy to break? Everyone laughed bitterly and looked at the impact point of the energy storm. The barrier there was still as smooth as a mirror. There was no reaction at all. They didn't have any hope. That attack had gathered the power of hundreds of divine weapons and added all their strength. In the end, it still couldn't break through. How strong was that broken thing? The Tau Ceti people also retreated a little with pale faces. Those who had unleashed too much energy even sat on the ground. Oh, it's a pity. If I was the one controlling the energy just now, and used 2/3 of my strength. Yun Nuoxing sighed and shook her head. What would happen? Chu Yingzhen gasped. She had also used up a lot of energy just now. You would see that the barrier is still standing firm. Yun Nuoxing rolled her eyes. Everyone, damn it, I finally saw through it. That thing is a rule barrier. It's not some high-level God-level energy barrier. It stands on the level of rules, and it can be called the absolute defense under rules. Yun Nuoxing sighed deeply and said in an inexplicable voice, "Ordinary low-level gods don't have the power of rules. That's a power that only god-emperors can start to control. Creating a rule barrier here is purely to torment people, right?" Everyone was speechless. Everyone was going crazy. Do you gods have any sense at all? Why do you always ask people to do things that are completely impossible? They were only low-level god-level hui. Even if they cultivated a god-level technique, It wasn't as if they could touch the power of rules just because they wanted to, okay? Only experts at the level of God Emperors could get rid of this thing. The problem was that until now, no one could recognize that this was a rule barrier. The stars and fate energy here weren't very attractive to God Emperors either. Wasn't this an endless loop? Seeing that everyone's faces had turned black and looked like they wanted to beat someone up, Yun Nuoxing shook her head helplessly. Anyway, that's what I meant. I just told you all that. As she said that, she felt someone tugging at her sleeve. She lowered her head and saw Tao Chu panting softly with her mouth open. Her gray eyes looked at him helplessly as if saying, "I'll leave it to you." Yun Nuoxing shrugged. When she raised her head, she saw that many people were looking at her and frowning. They were probably very curious about the person that the guide was looking for. The other 6 guides also looked over helplessly. The man said helplessly, "We've all tried our best, but it still didn't work. But this is also expected. I'll leave the rest of the time to you, okay?" Yun Nuoxing nodded and said, "Okay, you guys take a break." At this time, Yi Wenlu and the others also noticed Yun Nuoxing and the others. They looked at Yuan Shi and the others, then looked at Yun Nuoxing. They couldn't help but frown slightly. Yan Hua couldn't help but murmur, "It's her. She's the boss that guy was talking about?" When she turned her head, she saw Nightmare and Yuan Shi. The 2 of them also noticed them. They couldn't help but grin and give a thumbs up. Then, they pointed at Yun Nuoxing with their eyes. Their eyes seemed to be saying, "This is our boss." However, Yan Hua didn't quite understand why he could understand this sentence with just one look. At this time, the man leading the way received a signal from Tao Chu. He nodded, took a deep breath, and said, "Since we can't destroy that barrier even with all our strength, it might be a problem with the method we used. Whoever is confident can go and take a look at that barrier." This was just an ostentatious sentence. When this sentence was said, no one jumped out. After all, they had personally tested the toughness of the barrier just now. None of them were confident. If they jumped out and couldn't solve it, it would be a joke. Whenever there was a crack in the barrier, someone would rush up and give it a try. The problem was that the astral barrier didn't react at all. Yun Nuoxing spread his hands. He even deliberately waited for half a minute. Since no one came out, he would go himself. He turned his head and said to everyone, "Wait here for a while. I'll go and take a look at that thing. Ming, follow me." Ming was stunned for a moment. When he reacted, he saw Yun Nuoxing rushing out. Without thinking much, he also rushed out. When everyone saw that someone really rushed out, they also stretched their necks out curiously. Some of them had eyes full of ridicule. They wiped their eyes clean and waited for a good show. Qin Yu and the others looked into the distance for a while. She couldn't help but laugh. "Sister Yu Xin is going to take action. Oh, let's go and take a look." The Emperor of War also raised his voice a little. In front of the astral barrier, Yun Nuoxing and Ming raised their heads to look at the huge astral relic. They couldn't help but sigh. The latter was sighing. Looking at this thing up close was really shocking. The former couldn't help but say, "We're at this place again." Ming smiled faintly and said, "Brother, what do you plan to do? Do you want to use that kind of power?" "No need, but I need to use a special power. That's why I asked you to come." Yun Nuoxing shook his head. This time, he estimated that it might not be very big, but the reaction might be a little bigger. Yun Nuoxing didn't explain much. He waved his left hand, and a bright golden light element condensed into a whirlwind on his palm. He said to her, "Inject your power into my hand." As he spoke, a pure black energy appeared on his right hand. It was extremely dark and chaotic. It was incomparably violent, as if it could destroy everything. Seeing his posture, Ming instantly understood what he wanted to do. His heart skipped a beat, but he didn't say anything. He nodded, and divine power emerged from his body and flowed into his left hand in a steady stream. Buzz! His left hand held the world's purest and most sacred power, while his right hand held the darkness that could destroy and devour the entire world. These were two completely opposite powers. Yun Nuoxing didn't hesitate. His two hands fiercely clapped together with the two powers. A violent explosion almost penetrated the entire void. Yun Nuoxing's hands slowly loosened. He spat out a scorching breath, and a fist-sized transparent ball of energy appeared where his hands were clenched. At the core of the ball of energy were two balls of energy, one black and the other golden. The two balls of energy rapidly rotated, forming a Tai Chi symbol. The chaotic energy born from the two balls of energy was transmitted to the surface of the transparent ball of energy, and then flowed back into the ball of energy. That extremely terrifying power was felt by everyone even across the starry sky. It was a feeling of utter despair. Even though Yun Nuoxing's back was facing them, they could still clearly feel it. It was as if he was holding a power that could turn the entire world to ashes. Everyone's faces turned pale. That guy, some of the other people's eyes were filled with hope. Such a powerful energy should be enough to destroy the barrier, right? It's that move. Yuan Shi's cheeks trembled fiercely. He had sensed this power once before, and the memory was still fresh in his mind. It was extremely terrifying, extremely terrifying. It wasn't an attack that a human could produce at all. One strike was enough to destroy half the void. However, the energy fluctuations this time were clearly not as violent and chaotic as the one in the five elements realm. It was likely that Yun Nuoxing had not used his full strength. Otherwise, they would feel that they would be fatally threatened just by standing here. Buzz buzz. Around the transparent ball of light, space and void constantly cracked. Pale yellow and purple light burst out from the crack. Primal chaos origin. Yun Nuoxing murmured softly. He gently pushed the transparent ball of light with his hand, pushing it toward the energy barrier that was only 100 feet away. The next moment, he hurriedly pulled Ming and rushed out. The moment he turned around and ran, everyone saw an extremely brilliant ball of light expanding at an extremely fast speed. In just a few seconds, it expanded from the size of a fist to a size of 1,000 feet. The huge power pressed down on the barrier, and the golden and black energies in the center completely merged. At this moment, it emitted a light that could penetrate the world. Boom. Chapter 1007. The infinitely expanding mass of light crazily swallowed everything it came into contact with. Space, time, principles, karma, and even the void could not escape this crazy suction force. The barrier that everyone had been attacking for a long time without success was silently drilled open under this suction force that swallowed everything in the world. Qi. The primal chaos origin had not expanded to its limit, but it had already touched the magnificent star palace. Yun Nuoxing was alarmed when he saw this. He wanted to force the primal chaos origin to shrink so that it would not devour the palace. However, just as he was about to form a hand seal, a force suddenly erupted from the palace, causing the primal chaos origin to tremble violently. Then, it suddenly shrank until it disappeared. Phew! Yun Nuoxing heaved a sigh of relief. It was almost impossible to retrieve the primal chaos origin once it was thrown out. The more it devoured, the more violent it became, and the greater the range of its impact would be until it devoured everything within its range. With his current strength, he could at most suppress it and let it slowly dissipate. He did not expect the palace to have a backup plan and directly destroy it, as expected of a place left behind by that ancient life form. The primal chaos origin disappeared, and the colorful star barrier also appeared in front of everyone's eyes. When they saw a whole 100,000 feet in size appear in front of them, their jaws dropped in shock. They looked at Yun Nuoxing as if they had seen a ghost. Was that guy human? They had been attacking together for such a long time, but they had not been able to create a crack. He had directly blown it through. The faces of Tao Chu and the others were also twitching violently. They were already very curious when their grandmaster told them about this at the beginning. A person who could make their grandmaster treat him so seriously at this time was probably someone with a powerful background. They only thought so, but they didn't expect that this person with a powerful background would actually have this kind of strength. Yun Nuoxing turned his head and gave everyone a thumbs up. He smiled wickedly. Although you said there were some rules, I did not object. But the barrier is closing automatically. Everyone was startled. They hurriedly turned their heads and saw that the gap in the barrier of the Star Palace had indeed shrunk. The edges of the gap were shrinking at a speed visible to the naked eye. By the way, I might not be able to unleash that attack a second time. Wouldn't it be bad if we continue to wait? Yun Nuoxing said with a smile. Everyone turned pale with fright. The sturdy guide hurriedly stood up and threw all the shock to the back of his mind. He waved at the crowd and said, "Don't worry about resting. Hurry up and go over. We'll talk about it when we get there. Otherwise, it'll be too late." Boom! Before his voice could fade, many figures had already rushed out from the platform. He could not help but let out a bitter laugh. He shook his head and hurriedly charged towards the Star Palace with his companions. Yun Nuoxing and the others were the fastest to arrive. They were the first to land in front of the Star Palace's main door. However, they were not in a hurry to open the door. They waited until everyone had arrived before they walked up and kicked open the 10,000 zhang tall door. Clang! The deafening sound of the door being slammed open shocked everyone to their souls. When the heavy giant door slammed into the Star Palace, it felt as if the space itself was trembling due to the sound wave. Behind the door was a very ordinary passage. It did not look very luxurious, nor did it have any special patterns. The two sides and the top of the passage were white walls. It was so ordinary that it made one's eyes pop out. "What's with the look in your eyes?" Seeing the group of people, or rather, everyone here, stunned, Yun Nuoxing could not help but roll his eyes. Yuan Shi swallowed his saliva and rubbed his eyes. It still looked the same. He could not help but take a deep breath and said, "Isn't this Star Palace a little too shabby?" Yun Nuoxing's face twitched. He could not help but shake his head and sigh. However, before he could say anything, Chu Yingzhan helplessly spread out her hands and said to Yuan Shi jokingly, "Last time at the Void Fortress, you were still scolding me. What God's item? How can we, mere mortals, do anything? This place cannot be judged by first sight, little Yuan. Yuan Shi's face twitched. He could not help but let out a bitter laugh. He seemed to have said that last time. He did not expect that it would be used to teach him a lesson. "Hey, idiot, why don't you say something too?" Chu Yingzhan said as she poked Yun Nuoxing's face. Yun Nuoxing glanced at her but remained silent. His expression was a little solemn. After pondering for a while, he said, "When we go in later, don't run around. Don't touch anything. If anything happens, we will meet again 10,000 years later." Xian and the others shuddered and quickly shook their heads. 10,000 years later? Could it be that they would be hanging there for 10,000 years? Last time at Chu Yingzhan's house, this was what she said. "A token, a trip to the underworld, and we will meet again 10,000 years later." In other words, there were things inside that could not be touched. Casually touching them could lead to death. Yun Nuoxing even deliberately glanced at Little Moon and Yu. The two girls trembled and hurriedly assured him in their souls that they would not run around. Only then did he feel relieved. He was not paranoid. He had indeed sensed an ominous aura from inside the palace, which was why he asked everyone to be careful. That aura was too similar to the one he felt when he saw this palace last time. For a moment, he even felt that he had returned to that time. That day, he stood at the entrance of the palace and did not move for a long time. When everyone had rested enough, it seemed that they could start moving again. Yun Nuoxing nodded to Tao Chu and the others and said, "Then we will go in first." As soon as he said this, those who were still sitting and resting stood up with a bang. They were afraid that they would suffer a great loss if they went in too slowly. Yun Nuoshing was speechless. "We are going in. Old Shan, get ready to defend." Yun Nuoshing shouted softly, and the power of the stars surged out from his body. However, he was stunned in an instant. When he turned around and saw that everyone was stunned, he scratched the back of his head awkwardly and said, "Sorry, I was distracted. Be careful." Xian could not help but sigh softly in his heart. That subconscious words did not sound like much to him, but she felt very heartbroken. As expected, he still could not forget those things in the past. It was just that he had never told anyone about it. Looking at the people following behind him, Yun Nuoshing's eyes flickered. Some memories came back to him. He said to the people beside him and increased his speed, rushing into the depths. Yanhua had been paying attention to them all this time. At this moment, he could not help but frown. This place was a little strange. Could it be that the guy who looked a little strange knew the way here? Swoosh! After flying at the front for more than 10 minutes, 2 shadows suddenly rushed over from the front. Xian and the others were shocked. Just as they were about to condense their energy, the 2 shadows jumped onto Yun Nuoshing. Looking closely, they were the 2 little fellows, Xiao Xian and Little Magic. When I broke through the barrier just now, I let them slip in first. Yun Nuoshing smiled at the people behind him. He looked at Xiao Xian, whose consciousness had slipped into his collar, and said, "How is it? Is it the same route as the one I gave you?" Xiao Xian and Little Magic both cried out in response, and even nodded their little heads. Yun Nuoshing pondered for a while, then waved his hand and said, "Speed up. Let's go to the 12 shrines first. This place is much bigger than you think." "Brother?" Ming sped up a little and walked side by side with Yun Nuoshing. He turned his head and asked in confusion, "You found out?" "I let them walk for a while in order to verify if it was really the same as the 3,000 star ruins that I know. For now, it's exactly the same." Yun Nuoshing narrowed his eyes and said, "In the past, we walked around the 3,000 star ruins for 10 years, but we still could not finish exploring this place. You can imagine how big this place is. Many heavenly god-level powerhouses from the 3,000 great worlds died here. In the end, we went through an extremely fierce and bitter battle to open the main shrine. The only thing we gained was the clue that led to the realm of the gods." Xian and the others hesitated for a moment, but when they saw his extremely serious expression, they did not ask any more questions. They just lowered their heads and followed him. They did not know how long they had been flying in the main shrine, but there was no one following behind them. They were no longer in the original tunnel. Along the way, they came across many other shrines and some other things. There seemed to be very pure star fate in them, but Yun Nuoshing did not even bother to look at them. He flew at almost the speed of light and led Xian and the others through the shrines. The seriousness in his eyes did not lessen at all. Xian and the others felt that an aura seemed to be awakening from his body. It seemed to be the majesty of a heavenly god-level powerhouse, and it was gradually coming to life in his body. They flew at such a high speed for an entire day. Only then did Yun Nuoshing, who was at the front, begin to slow down and slowly come to a stop. He pushed hard against a blank wall. Clang! The wall, which was supposed to be a white board, was suddenly dyed with the color of stars. In the middle of the wall, there was a door that Yun Nuoshing suddenly pushed open with his palm, making an extremely heavy sound. Everyone was stunned. How could there be a door in this place? Behind the door was an ancient shrine. The shrine was extremely tall and spacious. Rows of pillars, which were hundreds of meters wide, were arranged in a fan shape. The upper and lower halves of the pillars were separated, and in the middle, there was a planet with a huge star ring floating. The ground they were standing on was also pitch black, just like the color of the star domain. Step by step, it was as if they were walking through a star domain. Between the pillars, there were many planets floating in the air. They were only hundreds and thousands of meters in size, and could not be compared to the huge fellows in the real star domain. In the innermost part of this ancient shrine, there was a wall. It was slightly curved, and there were many square lattices on the wall. They were neatly arranged in rows, and inside each lattice was a burning star of different colors. On the ground in front of the wall there was a statue. At the top of the statue was a huge planet surrounded by several star rings. There were many divine runes woven with the colors of the star domain, and it looked extremely profound. Yun Nuoxing walked in front of the statue and reached out to touch it. Her cheeks trembled slightly and she asked curiously, "It's already been opened? Could it be that the main shrine has already been opened?" Looking at the statue suspiciously, Yun Nuoxing sighed. With a wave of her hand, she took out the energy of this star. Then, she was stunned. Touching the pendant, she poured out a crystal from it. It had the same smell as the energy in her hand, and seemed to be of the same origin. I haven't thrown it away yet?" Yun Nuoxing was also stunned. This crystal was formed by the energy of the 12 statues in the 12 shrines. There were 12 of them in total, and they were used to open the door to the main shrine. She flipped through them, and found that the 12 crystals were still there. An ancient and heavy aura reverberated in the shrine. Yun Nuoxing and the others sat on the stars between the pillars of the shrine, and slowly recovered. After flying for a day, they were more or less tired. "Little star, the aura here seems to be a little similar to the star Fate?" Xian tilted her head and looked at Yun Nuoxing beside her, and asked. Yuan Shi opened his eyes and stretched. Half of his body was lying on the ball. "Not only that, I also feel that some of the star Fate that we collected seems to be able to find a corresponding star." Yun Nuoxing looked up. "Oh yes, it seems to be the same as the star aura here." As Yuan Shi spoke, he suddenly realized something. "Hey, little star, do you think that the star Fate leaked out from this shrine?" "Yes." Yun Nuoxing nodded. "The so-called star Fate really comes from some special energy of a star. It's very special, and it's as ethereal and unpredictable as fate. However, the two are not exactly the same. By the way, boss, the star Fate is related to the small divine land, right?" It's Nightmare's eyes turned, and she told him the information that Xian had found out. Then, she saw Yun Nuoxing's face tremble, and she said in shock, How did you know?" Look, I told you that this idiot would definitely be stunned." Chu Yingzhan couldn't help but laugh when she saw the look on his face. Everything was going according to her plan. Yun Nuoxing glanced at her faintly, and the crazy girl trembled all over. She muttered a few words and then stopped talking. "That's right, it's just as you said. When you enter the small divine land with the star Fate will be activated by the rules of the primordial age. In other words, that special energy will start to take effect." Yun Nuoxing paused for a moment, then said, "In the primordial age, when a person enters the quasi-mortal stage, they can find a star, an entire star, and let its light descend on them, directly adding the star Fate to their body. The change in the star Fate will start to manifest at that moment, and it will stay with them for life. If that star is destroyed, the star Fate won't disappear until the star's light disappears. If it disappears, they can still find a second one. However, the following steps are a bit more troublesome. It's very troublesome to change the star Fate you have. It's equivalent to the difficulty of returning your current energy to a higher level." "Then why is it gone now?" Yuan Shi scratched his head, puzzled. "This is a method that only applies in the primordial age." Yun Nuoxing sighed and said helplessly, "Only the rules of the primordial age can trigger the star Fate and make it come back to life from a frozen state. I call it activation. I don't know much about the primordial age, but the rules of heaven and earth in this age no longer support something as ethereal as the star Fate. There probably aren't many records in your family that have anything to do with the star Fate." The last sentence was said to Yuan Shi and Qin Yen. Both of them nodded, and the former said, "There are some records in the primordial age that involve the star fate. It seems to be what you said, allowing the power of an entire star to descend on a person. However, there are no such records in the primordial age. I don't know if it was lost or never existed in the first place." Yun Nuoxing thought for a moment and said, "Then perhaps the rules of heaven and earth have changed since the primordial age, and the star fate has become unusable. Therefore, the special energy that should have illuminated a person's entire life is now scattered all over the God realm. Those who have obtained the star fate only need to go to the small divine lands to activate the star fate. The changes that should have occurred at the quasi-mortal realm have accumulated all the way to the current realm, and all of them burst out in one go. The accumulated amount is enough to be reborn and change one's appearance. It's equivalent to starting a new life, right?" Chu Yingzhan pondered and said. Yun Nuoxing looked at her seriously and nodded seriously. "That's right, it's like that." "How much influence does the quality of the star fate have on this?" Yuan Shi asked in his soul, after abruptly ending his rest and flying around the hall. "Of course, it's very big." Yun Nuoxing replied grumpily, "It's the star fate that causes the change. How much influence do you think the quality of the star fate has? If you had to use a mortal weapon to slap a god in the face, or a divine weapon to slap a god in the face, which one would you choose?" "I don't choose either," Chu Yingzhan said angrily. "Both of them are seeking death." Yun Nuoxing. Alright, that's just a metaphor. Anyway, that's what it means. It's like eating a fairy's item is the same as eating ordinary medicinal ingredients on the street. That should be fine, right? Xian and the others nodded in understanding. They should have understood from the start. In the primordial age, because there was an entire star hanging above your head shining on you, everyone had a high affinity with the power of the stars. Even if you don't cultivate the power of the stars, this affinity can make you feel less uncomfortable when you first set foot in the star field. Those with a high affinity can walk around the star field like a fish in water, and can even draw on the power of the stars to replenish themselves. Yun Nuoxing took a deep breath and continued, "If we're going by the classification of the stars in the primordial age, the amount of star fate you have is pitifully small." Xian and the others looked away awkwardly. They couldn't be blamed for this. Their innate conditions were not on the same level at all. Only Bing Airs is slightly better, so you have to be mentally prepared. Perhaps there won't be enough changes to cause a huge change in the small divine lands, no matter how high the quality of the star fate is. Yun Nuoxing spread her hands helplessly. "But it's hard to say. After all, I don't know what specific changes will happen the moment I enter the small divine lands with the star fate. Everything I'm saying now is just the result of my experience and deduction. The error won't be more than 10%. Well, there are many things that have changed, and many things have changed because the rules have changed. All the life forms that live under the rules have no choice but to change themselves. To be born against the rules, there's only death. To be born with the will of the heavens, and to die against the will of the heavens. That's how it is." Yun Nuoxing's expression became a little inexplicable. She sighed and said faintly, "Just like the original life forms, this is a mockery to them. They are originally life forms outside the rules, but they have to mature and follow the rules. Before that, if they leave the cradle, they will only dissipate in the world that is called the correct rules. I once saw an original life form dissipate in front of me. In a certain great battle, she took on nearly 40% of the pressure for me. Even though she was already an original life form, her injuries were too severe, and her origin leaked out. She had already reached the limit of her ability to deceive the world. In the end, she still dissipated in front of me. She dissipated into a silver-blue rain of light. She was a life formed by the space." Yun Nuoxing said with a smile. As she smiled, her eyes couldn't help but dim. If I was a heavenly god at that time, maybe there would be a way. At least I would have been a god. If I hadn't run out on my own at that time. Xian and the others looked at the side of his face and remained silent. They didn't know what to say. Was he still regretting it now? So you haven't changed your bad habit of sneaking away until now? Chu Yingzhan sighed. Yun Nuoxing's cheeks twitched. He coughed dryly and said, I'm really sorry about my bad habit that can't be changed. Count it yourself. How many times have you sneaked away in these 2 lives? It should be around 10 times, right? Chu Yingzhan said in annoyance. Yun Nuoxing's expression changed. She said in a serious voice, maybe it's not just 10 times, huh? Everyone was shocked. Well, that's actually because. Yun Nuoxing laughed dryly. Before she could explain, Chu Yingzhan rushed up and kicked her into the wall. It's a habit of yours to sneak away, isn't it? Are you a rat? Why are you so good at sneaking away? Chu Yingzhan choked his neck. No one knew what she was thinking. She was so angry that she grabbed him and shook him with all her might. I think I'm used to it, Yun Nuoxing answered very seriously even though he was being choked. Everyone. So what kind of idiot were you in your previous life? You were already stupid enough in this life, extraordinarily stupid. From the looks of it, it's still the root of trouble left over from your previous life. Yes, root of trouble. Chapter 1008. Oh, the second temple's star ring has been activated too. In another part of the Star Palace, Yun Nuoxing and the others were standing in a circular hall. A huge star was floating in the center of the hall, and 3 huge stars were slowly rotating around the star. They were surrounded by a rather realistic black space, and the ground was outlined with a circle of blue lines. The ground was surrounded by a circle of blue lines, and it was no different from a real flat ground. It takes a whole day to run to a single place, and that's under the premise that little star knows the way. When you first came here, how did you find the way if you didn't know the way? Yuanqi sat down in the starry sky to rest, and couldn't help but ask. The distance between the so-called second temple and the first one they entered took them a whole day to run. Who knew how many forks in the road they took? They could only walk so fast because they knew the way. Who knew how long it would take for a person with no sense of direction to walk? So, back then, there were hundreds of thousands of people, and 40% of them were divine masters, but we still spent 10 years here. Moreover, opening the main temple back then wasn't as simple as you think. Yun Nuoxing also sat down to rest. She raised her head, and some memories flashed past her eyes. Back then, in the 12 temples, each temple had an extremely powerful guard, and they were at the level of divine masters. We gathered the power of hundreds of thousands of divine masters, and in the end, we lost many people just to kill the guard of one temple. We opened 12 temples in a row, and in the end, we lost 6 figures of divine masters, and countless divine masters. Do you think that was a difficult time? Yuan Shi's cheeks twitched. This wasn't a question of whether it was a difficult time or not. That's why you were so serious when you came in. Xian seemed to understand why Yun Nuoxing had such a serious expression from the moment she came in. Yun Nuoxing scratched her head. I thought we would have to fight again. If we really had to fight again, this time, I don't have hundreds of thousands of divine masters with me. With hundreds of thousands of divine masters, I'm probably the only one who can be considered to have any combat power. In that long battle back then, it was the 10 of us who led the charge. It's not very possible for me to fight alone. I thought you'd say it's just a little harder? Chu Yingzhan teased. How is that possible? That is an expert above the heavenly god level. Heavenly gods are not even ants in front of it. Yun Nuoxing bitterly smiled and shook his head. Starting from the demon rank, the difference in strength between each small realm is relatively large, the initial god rank is even more so, but the initial god rank is very special, there is a forbidden time, the increase of the realm is limited, The rest of the time can be used to increase the battle strength. This is the only way to close the gap in strength caused by the realm. The later god rank also has a forbidden time. The time is longer than the initial god rank, but in the later god rank, the difference of each small realm is too big. In the end, the gap between realms is very large. In the end, we simply use the difference between realms to measure the fighting strength. Even in the past, among the divine masters, I could only fight across realms by 3 small realms. Those who can maintain a fighting strength of more than 3 small realms in the later god realm are already very few. It's not an exaggeration to say that they are as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. Oh, although I said so, as far as I know at that time, there were about 100 people who could achieve the same level. However, this number is really quite rare in the entire 8 elements realm. There are tens of millions of high-level life forms in a world. Generally speaking, at the later god realm, there are countless worlds in the void, but in the end, I only know about 100 of them. Don't you think it's rare? Yuan Shi and the others were dizzy from talking about such a large number of things. In the end, they had to make a decision in their minds. Although they didn't know how many there were, it was probably a lot. Ming rolled his eyes and thought of something. He pulled Yun Nuoxing's arm and asked, "Didn't you say that there are no divine masters outside the realm of the gods, especially divine masters?" Yun Nuoxing nodded and said, "That's just the wording. From what we can see, the heavenly god-tier powerhouses from other worlds are not on par with our heavenly god-tier powerhouses. In other words, the heavenly god-tier powerhouses from the heavenly god realm are stronger and purer. That's why we usually call the heavenly god-tier powerhouses from other worlds the heavenly god-tier powerhouses from other worlds the heavenly god-tier powerhouses. Unless they reach the realm of the owner of this palace, we would all call them heavenly god-tier powerhouses from other worlds the heavenly god-tier powerhouses from other world. That's because no matter which world it is, the heavenly god-tier powerhouses are almost the same. All the advantages and disadvantages brought about by one's own world would all be eliminated when one reaches the heavenly god-tier. Everyone would once again stand on the same starting line. That's what's recorded in ancient history. I don't know the specifics, but when I think of the powerful protection left behind by the owner of this palace, I think it's most likely true. The advantages of being from the realm of the gods. Chu Yingzhan raised her eyebrows and asked. Yun Nuoxing scratched her head awkwardly and said, "That seems to be the case." Then, it was almost destroyed by the combined forces of thousands and hundreds of worlds, Chu Yingzhan said. Yun Nuoxing said, "After all, there were thousands and hundreds of worlds, and there were many divine masters who were comparable to divine masters. At that time, many of the divine masters and divine masters of the realm of the gods had fled to other worlds, and there was no one behind them. Besides, no one would have thought that the realm of the gods would be invaded one day. After all, the title of the greatest realm in the 8 elements realm is still there." Chu Yingzhan pursed her lips and sighed. No one knew what she was muttering to herself. Yun Nuoxing also felt a little helpless. The identity of being from the realm of the gods was really lonely at the top. Back then, his notoriety had spread far and wide, and his reputation had been blown too high. When he fell, it was too painful. At that time, if they hadn't sacrificed themselves, who knew what would have happened in the end? It was undeniable that he had a sense of superiority because of this identity. When facing people from other worlds, this identity was a symbol of strength and power. This was also undeniable. In the past, the divine masters who walked out of the realm of the gods were basically invincible in other worlds, and it was difficult for them to find a worthy opponent. Even if they were killed, it was probably because they angered the masses, and they were killed by the combined forces of the masses. Moreover, the combined forces of the masses were probably measured in thousands. That ancient life form was originally a life form from the lower plane of the 8 elements realm. I don't know much about his personal history. He had been crossing the void plane and came to the upper plane, but he only set foot on the edge of the upper plane. He probably stayed in that world for a long time until he broke through to the Divine Master level. Their world cultivates the power of the stars, which is called Star Force for short, and the Divine Master level is also called Star Force. I don't know much about the rest. Logically speaking, there is a big difference between the Divine Masters of the upper plane and the Divine Masters of our realm of the gods. However, after he broke through to the Star Force level, it seems that all the disadvantages of external factors were eliminated. This is what I learned from the notes he left behind, Yun Nuoshing said. Are we on the way to the third divine palace now? Yuan Shi looked around and couldn't tell if they had walked on this path or not. She couldn't help but roll her eyes. It was better to just ask directly. This palace was very strange. The main hall and the other spaces were all hidden behind the walls. If she slapped her palm, she might not necessarily see a palace. Instead, she might see a massive sun with a diameter of tens of millions of kilometers. Just a moment ago, they were almost burned to ashes by a blue sun. No, we're going directly to the main hall now. The switches of the first and second divine palaces have been opened. According to the speed, it's impossible for others to open them before us. Besides, I'm probably the only one who knows about this. Even if there are others, they're probably not in this place. So, we can only speculate that the mechanisms of the 12 divine palaces are in an activated state. We just need to go to the main hall. The things left behind in the other small places are not particularly valuable to me. Yun Nuoshing shook her head. She suddenly thought of something and said, "Speaking of which, your melted star stones are full, right?" Yuan Shi and the others were startled and scratched their heads. The former laughed dryly and said, "For the time being, they're full." "What do you mean by saying that there's something hidden?" Yun Nuoshing's cheeks twitched. She seemed to have guessed something. "You didn't put them back together with the shells, did you?" "Well, the extraction of the energy layer is a bit." Yuan Shi laughed dryly and turned his face away. "For the time being, we tried our best. It's just that half of it is mixed with the energy layer. In order to strip off the other half of the energy layer, we destroyed the destiny of countless stars." Chu Yingzhan dryly laughed. "It's very difficult." Qin Yen nodded. Yun Nuoshing was speechless and looked at Xian. That girl also looked helpless. It seemed that her 5 elements body was still not enough to handle this kind of energy. They had to retrieve all of her 5 elements' origins as soon as possible. Sighing, Yun Nuoshing looked at Ming and Bing Er again. Ming hesitated for a while and muttered, "It's full, but it only has the fate of gold stars. It doesn't feel like it's enough. The quality of gold stars is only second among the pure colors. We haven't even considered the mixed colors. It's full, but it's only gold. Most of it was done by me." Bing Er's beautiful eyes flashed with excitement as she looked at him with a bit of hope. Yun Nuoshing smiled dotingly and reached out to rub her long bluish-gold hair. Bing Er's talent in energy control was inherited from him through the soul contract between them. If he improved, so would she. He wasn't worried about the extent to which the two of them could collect the fate of stars. For ordinary people, gold stars are indeed enough. It's also the highest quality that they can generally come into contact with. Compared to the mixed colors, only golden red and reddish black are better than gold. The others are not as good as gold, Yun Nuoshing said. That is to say, he can be ranked 4th, right? Yuan Shi spread his hands. It was a little comforting to say this. After all, although it was said that it was generally possible to come into contact with gold stars, in reality, those who could come into contact with gold stars were very powerful. At least compared to them, they couldn't be much weaker. Other than that, they could only rely on special means to come into contact with it. At least, that was what they felt in the 9 heavens star rivers. The fate of the 3,000 stars all leaked out from this star palace. If we can find the corresponding star, Chu Yingzhan's obsidian-like Mei-Mao flashed and suddenly had a bold idea. Put away that bold idea of yours. It's useless even if we come across it. Yun Nuoxing rolled his eyes, probably knowing what she was thinking. Even if you find it, you can't take it away. It's a star that really exists somewhere in the galaxy of a certain world. It might even be a star that can burn an emperor of the underworld into charcoal. Even Star Drop can't do that. You guys have long passed the suitable time for Star Drop. The earliest is the quasi-mortal level, and the latest is the immortal level. After that, your body's strength has reached a certain level, and that kind of gradual cycle method is useless. It's better to directly inject a large mass of star's fate into your body. TSK. Chu Yingzhan curled her lips. She was just thinking about it. She rolled her eyes and obviously didn't want to give up. What if we come across that reddish-black star of yours? Yun Nuoxing paused and said helplessly, that's also useless. The fate of the stars is a very ethereal and incredible energy. It can't be directly taken from the stars. If you want it, you can only use the starlight every day. It's a strange energy that is finally born after every strand of starlight crosses countless distances and undergoes some kind of mysterious reaction. We've tried to reverse the rules and control the fate of the stars, but to no avail. Some kind of mysterious reaction in the galaxy? Yuan Shi scratched his head in confusion. Why did it sound so mysterious? That's it. We're not too sure either. I used the Book of Epochs to trace back a strand of starlight until the strand of starlight that descended on me returned to its star, but I didn't feel any changes. The only thing we know is that the strand of starlight that descended on me didn't carry the so-called fate of the stars when it came out of the star, but the starlight that descended on me did. Something that we can't understand must have happened along the way. In addition, the stars that can be seen everywhere in the night sky will also emit fate of the stars, but it's too thin, and most of it will dissipate in the air. If there's a special energy source, it will gather towards that place and gradually form what we saw today. Large clumps of fate wrapped in a layer of energy. This is also one of the ways to obtain it. The other, more stable method is the star subduing I told you about. When all the light from that star is focused on you, what kind of fate can't you obtain? However, as for the quality, it depends on luck. If you have a black star hanging above your head at the beginning, other than mistaking it for the death omen star flashing above your head, you can also obtain the black star's fate. Yun Nuoxing shook her finger above her head. When she said, the death omen star flashing, at the end, everyone didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Little Star used to have a star all to itself, right? Was it a reddish-black star? Xian asked. Yun Nuoxing nodded. Reddish-black stars are very rare in the galaxy. They're special, so the fate of the stars that descend upon them is also very special. However, they're flammable and explosive. I've already subdued the star from the ancient age when I was a quasi-mortal. At that time I was excited for a while because it was of the highest quality. However, it disappeared millions of years later, which was the end of its starlight. That star died countless years ago, and millions of years after I captured it, the last strand of starlight also came to an end. A star that died billions of years ago, and its light has just shone on this world. It's a span of time that mortals can't understand. Yun Nuoxing sighed. The stars in the sky are as numerous as the sand in the sea. They're like the dust that descends upon the world. They're just a strand of dust, but they represent all the beautiful things that I've preserved for this world. That's the world that I know, a sea of sand formed by endless dust. They're the most sparkling grains of sand under the night sky. Yun Nuoxing sighed and closed the great hall that he came across by chance. The wall returned to a white board from the starry sky. He turned around and continued to walk into the depth. That's my favorite scenery. It's just that I don't have much time to look at it. I'm in a hurry, one lifetime after another. In the end, I'm still looking up at the starry sky that's within reach in the endless distance, but I'm sad that I can't touch it. Yuan-shi slapped the wall next to him and opened a huge door with a bang. He secretly sighed that his luck was pretty good. He didn't just slap a star out. He poked his head in to take a look and found that the golden fate of the stars were placed on the ground like cabbages. He immediately lost interest and closed the door again. After closing the door, Yuan-shi sighed and said, "This is what it's called. That kind of desire, the contradictory feeling of reaching out your hand but being unable to get it. You clearly feel that everything is within your control, but you just can't keep that scenery. I've never thought of controlling the star domain in my own hands. Only the beauty of nature is perfect. Once there's a place to belong, it will always be different. From the beginning to the end, I've only been watching. I'm just like a child who's naively longing for the starry sky. I open the window in the middle of the night and look at the sky that's beyond my reach. When I grow up, the starry sky is no longer mysterious and distant, and no one will look up at the starry sky in the middle of the night." Chu Yingzhan's jade-like palm suddenly slapped the wall, but in the end, nothing came out. Her palm even hurt from the impact, and her pretty face twisted. "Are you trying to say that you're still a child? What's so good about the starry sky? There are so many stars in the sky, and there are so many newborn stars and stars that are about to fall. The starry sky is filled with sparks, and if I look at it too much, I feel like I'm in a trance. There are also many places with life, and the entire star domain is filled with life. Other than that, I really can't figure out why you're looking at the starry sky. The starry sky contains secrets. The starry sky of every world is the same. You don't know, and I don't necessarily know. Since ancient times, so many gods and deities have liked to study the starry sky. They definitely aren't just looking at the stars. They must be looking at something. Perhaps they've seen something." Yun Nuoxing shook her head and leisurely stepped forward. She placed her palm on the wall and used a bit of force to search for something. Xian carefully pushed open a door, and little magic squeezed through the gap in the door first. It even let out a "p" sound which made her chuckle. Moments later, the white meatball came out again and shook its head at her, indicating that there was nothing special inside. It jumped back onto her head, and Xian closed the door. "Big brother Yun, what are we looking for?" Chu Chen suddenly remembered something very important. They were unconsciously looking for something here, chatting as they looked for something. As a result, he was only looking for something subconsciously, but he didn't know what he was looking for. "The main hall. The main hall's corridor is here, but I don't remember exactly where it is." Yun Nuoxing shrugged helplessly. "There aren't any clear signs here. We can only search blindly. Push open the door and you'll see the door to the innermost 12 sacred halls. It's a door with 12 huge signs," Yun Nuoxing said as she gestured with her hands. Ming, who was walking at the front, paused. He was about to close the door subconsciously, but at that moment, he hurriedly pushed open the door that was almost closed. He stuck his head in to take a look and was stunned. "Big brother, is the main hall you're looking for like this?" Yun Nuoxing and the others were stunned. They hurriedly left the few doors that had just been opened and closed them with a rumble. They ran to Ming Ming's side and squeezed their heads through the door. They saw the deepest part of the palace at a glance. It was a huge black iron door,